Our story begins on the battlefield, and with the skeleton's body being covered with dark energy, the ordinary knights start screaming for everyone to run to save their lives, because a huge silhouette appeared on the battlefield and covered all the skeletons with its dark energy. It's the demon of Taros. It's an insanely scary monster with chains on its arms and scary faces. At this second, a mysterious guy in dark robes appears and laughs evilly. It's the champion of the Allied forces, Han Ji-hyuk. Ji-hyuk laughs, saying that it was worth all the trouble making that. Behind him is an old man who is clearly intimidated by him. The old man turns to Ji-hyuk, asking why every time they fight Ji-hyuk calls him along. And he is an archmage, a summoner. Ji-hyuk responds with an angry face, reminding him that he is the one who summoned him, and that it's fair enough if he fights on his side. The archmage tries to ask him to let him go, but Ji-hyuk, with an angry face, says that if he throws someone into the thick of things, the archmage will have to take responsibility even if he does. Ji-hyuk himself has been teleported here from the comfort of his home with plenty of cheap dopamine, and now he's been forced to fight on the battlefield for 30 years. Ji-hyuk didn't even have time to understand him, the so-called great cause of the Allied forces to him. Those enemies and all of you are no different. Even so, the only reason Ji-hyuk helping him is because it's the fastest way for him to get back to Earth. So, stop nagging and behave, okay, Archimage? Then Ji-hyuk, the Necromancer's pet, lets out a roar and scares everyone around him. Ji-hyuk finds the Demon King among the rubble, at which point the Archimage smilingly congratulates Ji-hyuk for defeating the Demon King himself. Ji-hyuk didn't like that the end was really so close. Ji-hyuk started to get angry, cursing the Demon King as he prepared 4 more ultimatum weapons against him. Ji-hyuk smiled and turned to the Archmage, asking him if it was time to keep his promise. Now, amongst the mountains of gold, Ji-hyuk smiled and enjoyed the new shiny, little beautiful things. Ji-hyuk smiled and began to bathe in the gold coins, saying that one day he would return to Earth and finally be able to live and enjoy his life in peace, just relaxing and having fun. At this point, the Archmage beckons Ji-hyuk over, saying that everything is already ready for him to go to Earth. Ji-hyuk finally says goodbye to the Archimagus with a wave of his hand, saying that he realizes that if he stays, the Archimagus won't be very happy about it. The Archimage tries to say something, but Ji-hyuk silently walks over to him and says that he doesn't need any more small talk. Ji-hyuk demands a well-deserved vacation to Earth. Finally, this manga crystal twisted causality, allowing Ji-hyuk to remain in this world. Also thanks to this stone freezing Ji-hyuk's timeline, he hasn't even aged in the last 30 years of harsh war. The Archimage also tells Ji-hyuk that once this crystal is shattered, the causality will reverse, and he will return to the exact moment he was brought here. So the Archimage says a lot of complicated things. Ji-hyuk finally touches the crystal, asking if he really got this whole causality thing. But this is all he needs to do, right? The Archmage states that, yes, he is already at his limit. And also, he needs to resist some kind of reversal of causality. He needs to accept it. Then Ji-hyuk smiles and then swings his blade. And so, Ji-hyuk's eyes went dark. And in a moment he opened his eyes as wide as he could and smiled widely, shouting that he was finally back. Woohoo! After a while, Ji-hyuk was already eating chips and imagining getting himself some kimchi and fried rice and kimchi stew. And after that, Ji-hyuk thought about it and then sighed heavily, saying that he had gotten nothing, but now he had time and money, so he would try different things that he couldn't before. Finally, Ji-hyuk decided to check the things he had brought with him. He opened his pocket vault and tried to take out an item, but feeling nothing, he decided to look into it completely. Ji-hyuk's joy of complete freedom was interrupted in an instant. He fell silent. All his gold bars, treasures, his immortal army and savings fund. Where the hell did Ji-hyuk end up? He ended up in some place called Saron. Ji-hyuk appeared in the middle of the square, accompanied by a violet bright energy. Ji-hyuk couldn't figure out where he was, so he looked around to get an idea of where he was. Ji-hyuk was here suddenly, so he asked what this place was, and was told that it was the continent of Saron. Ji-hyuk couldn't understand where the hell he was, and what the hell was this nonsense. Already in Ji-hyuk's private office, the familiar Archimagus questioned Ji-hyuk about what he had just said. Ji-hyuk couldn't understand why the hell he was sitting in that office doing nothing. After all the hardship he went through, the way the still young Archimagus saved young Ji-hyuk with his shield, the way Ji-hyuk put up with the locals. Even the Archimagus had already aged, And he, having waited so long for the day of his return to Earth, remembering his friend, he doesn't understand why he could do this to him. Ji-hyuk abruptly jumps up and yells that he can't leave retirement like that. Remembering Theros, he calls him a dumbass. At one point, Ji-hyuk feels a flow of mana, but he doubts it because he is on the ground. Meanwhile, a rift in space opens up somewhere on Earth. And while everyone is running away from the rift, Ji-hyuk runs towards it. Ji-hyuk looks up at the sky and sees limitless chaos. Why the hell is something like this happening on Earth? Ji-hyuk calls and asks him why the hell he sent him to this planet. Ji-hyuk realizes that he has to get out of here before something that could cause trouble happens. At that moment, Ji-hyuk sees a child who is under attack by one of the monsters. He is resigned to his fate, but Ji-hyuk gathers all the mana in his hand and prepares to attack the monster. At that moment, a loud voice asks the inhabitants to disperse, and the hunter who has appeared abruptly rescues the child. The knight asks if the child is all right, to which the child replies positively. The child begins to run away from the battlefield, and everyone around them abruptly begins to panic. The knights continue to fight on the battlefield, destroying monsters with different types of weapons. Ji-hyuk looks at these people and wonders what people with such power are on Earth. Ji-hyuk is also asked to be careful by one of the hunters, who at the same time shoots a fire beam at the monster behind Ji-hyuk, causing him to laugh nervously and remember the archimage from the past world asking him, "Where the hell did you send it?" After a while, Ji-hyuk sits in his room with his computer and silently reads the news for a long time. After a few days of searching the internet, he confirms that this place is the land he knows, the difference being that now there are gates, monsters, and the awakened. Since gates started appearing on Earth, some people began developing unusual abilities. They call them awakened. Before he left Saron, Teros was rambling about causality or something. But what matters most now is that his luxurious retirement plans have been completely ruined. At his age, do he really have to worry about making a living? Ji-hyuk realized that if he registered as an awakened, he could hunt monsters near the gate and make money quickly. But he doesn't want to do that. He can use magic and make the skeletons do what he wants. But there's another problem. This is really the best method, even though he would like to see how people react to the undead. A few hours later, several scientists were looking at the undead that Ji-hyuk had summoned and marveling at his skills. After the scientist picked up a bat to test the skeleton's skill level in combat, and then the scientist took off the skeleton's head with a light blow. The skeleton's head really rolled away, and the scientist began to marvel that this skeleton was so damn weak. The scientist decided to meet in the conversation room, but then Ji-hyuk used a special skin to find out what they were saying in the room. It's something new and interesting, but very weak. That's what Ji-hyuk finds out, for which rightly, according to the scientists, he gets a level F rank. Yes, now Han Ji-hyuk has a rank of F. He realized that now is the time to make some money, and so Ji-hyuk headed out into the streets in search of new adventures. Most necromancers use their mana to empower the undead, giving them new abilities to move. But human strength is limited, so this method limits the amount of undead controlled by the necromancer. But there was still another method. It was with this method that Ji-hyuk arrived here and had already taken the huge green goblin by surprise. Seeing the goblin's ability to spit acid surprised Ji-hyuk quite a bit, so he decided to change his strategy and began to build up complex attack algorithms for his undead and their strategy. These magic circles Ji-hyuk called macro system. Simply put, he pre-programmed algorithms into the undead, so they can respond automatically in specific situations, following preset commands. Well, that's basically how it works. This way he don't have to control them manually, and he can summon as many units as he wants. Ji-hyuk can't believe he's back at it. But this method is very similar to computer programming. There were a lot of bugs, so the system wasn't perfect. But thanks to the content he had in the Saron world, he customized his macros perfectly because it lasted 30 les. If he had those, he wouldn't have to deal with this mess. Yeah, it's his best investment of time ever. Thanks to Ji-hyuk's algorithm of actions, the skeletons easily dismantled the boss in the dungeon, and he finally went into his phone, decided to see his results because he has been hunting for quite some time. Time to go back. After a while, in the middle of the location where they gather appeared Ji-hyuk, who coolly came out of the portal, making his undead drag goblins. He was met by a big guy with a palm tree on his head who smiled at him. The big guy was obviously happy that he was here too, because he had gotten a lot of loot again today. Ji-hyuk smiled and was surprised that they weren't even checking the loot, so he asked them to do a quick count. The skeletons at this time loaded the loot into a special truck. After all the deductions, the total amount of his transfer was 2.0000.000 KRW, to which Jihyuk smilingly asked him to transfer it to his account. Jihyuk got the money right away, and after saying goodbye to the palmhead, he finally started to leave. Jihyuk realized that this is better than getting a high rank and drawing too much attention. Jihyuk realized that he just needed to survive. At first he fine-tuned his macros, he will be fine. At this time, Jihyuk began to hear other hunters, who were obviously not happy with his success, because Jihyuk had received too many rewards. Yes, the hunters wanted to do the same, so they wanted to take him as a team. But alas, summoners don't usually team up, because they supposedly can't synchronize with the team. Jihyuk approached the knights, and they immediately apologized for speaking so loudly. Jihyuk smilingly began to shake his hand, saying that there was no mistake. Were they really looking for a porter? Actually, the knights said that they were really looking for such a person. Jihyuk clapped his hands and then asked if they could try a brand new porter in that case. As part of his grand opening event, he'll offer it to absolutely free. It's Jihyuk's business idea. It's absolutely brilliant. All the corpses that fell in the dungeons, thanks to the knights who cut off their heads. Jihyuk gave those knights a wonderful item that can withstand much more than they expected. This is the Skeleton Porter MK2. It's a product designed to use skeletons as porters, though it still needs a lot of refinement. And yes, apparently, a lot of adventurers found it quite useful. So the cunning Jihyuk has already offered them to use it for only 30,000 won per hour, which would be about 3 people of the porter's rank. Of course, this offer seems to be quite useful to the awakened ones, and Jihyuk further fuels their interest by saying that he has a special discount for them. And so, after a while, Jihyuk is no longer an awakened man, but a businessman quietly sipping coffee in a corner under an umbrella. Nearby is a tent with a huge number of his own MK2s. They are served by a beautiful girl who at the same time is still unknown to us. But wait, who is this girl out of the blue? To understand this, we need to go back in time, where it all started with the day Jihyuk roaming the gate to perfect the Skeleton Porter MK2's macro system. But at one point he smelled a strange odor in the middle of the dungeon, where it turned out to be a dead man. All of Jihyuk's undead started to look at it fearfully, but Jihyuk decided to ignore it and just asked his undead to move on. But after walking a little further, he was forced to turn around, sighing he still didn't understand why he couldn't keep his nose out of other people's business. Still, Jihyuk needed another member of the team, so he started using his system to tame him. Jihyuk began to see her past, where it appeared that she wanted to help her family when she was awakened, but she was eventually thrown off the team after being critically injured. Jihyuk, finally finishing using his system, was angered by this, because it's disappointing when people can be betrayed by such a bunch of garbage, which is why Jihyuk was happy to work with Hanseoa. She's now a zombie assistant who just learned her name. That's how she became Jihyuk's assistant. Anyway, Jihyuk's business has literally exploded, and now he has the perfect part-timer. Money is easy to make, but the only problem is the question, who the hell killed his favorite assistant then? At one point, Jihyuk abruptly got up from his chair and put his coffee on his assistant's desk and said that he would be back soon. He just needed to use the restroom. At this time, a nearby company of porters were frustrated that no one was hiring them after MK2's appearances. They decided to move on to the next gate, but this one is the closest. Then he wanted to make a special request. Namely, he wanted to limit the supply of MK2s so they could get work. Even if they moved to another gate, it wouldn't solve the problem. They still have stock, even after lending everything at this time. That means they could soon expand to other nearby gates. But how long will they wait for their destiny? They need a job right away. At that moment, a certain Kim Young-gi calls out to them from behind, saying that the kid is making some sense for once. They talk about Jihyuk and the fact that he only has an F rank. He uses all his undead as porters. That's not how he can make money. One of their team members was mad surprised that this kid was going to mess with Jihyuk. But no, he's not dumb enough to fight an awakened man, no matter how weak he is. But Kim has a cunning plan. He'll have his awakened friends behind him. So Kim convinces this group of misfits to just follow him. The girl in their company thinks it's a good offer, and the other guy in their team thinks it's unfair that he has to work for 10,000 won an hour to make a living, but he wants to solve everything without negativity and stressing the situation. The bespectacled guy in the company also says that there's no guarantee that it will work, so he's going to give Kim a chance. Kim keeps stressing the situation by asking what else they should do, because all his friends are on their way. So they are about to start talking. Anyway, Kim suggests him to change his mind and join them, because his power is something that can at least be used. The smart dude realizes that it's not a good idea, and he's going to warn Ji-hyuk in a secret way. Meanwhile, there's a sound in the men's restroom, and after a moment behind this dude, Ji-hyuk appears and asks, "Are you trying to warn me?" Ji-hyuk really likes having someone on his side. Yeah, Ji-hyuk heard everything. He also hates it when people try to trap him and take him by surprise. He was going to wreck everything. Ji-hyuk points his finger at the guy and says what he said was pretty cute, so he's going to think it over. Ji-hyuk offers to work part-time for him. He's been meaning to expand his business anyway, and he pays him generously, so here's the good deal. Of course, the guy was happy because this way all the other porters would return. Ji-hyuk understood this too because it was the best plan. But the other porters were going to crush him, weren't they? Of course, the guy was amazed by this. He tried to change Ji-hyuk's mind by saying that they had a reason because they didn't have money, but Ji-hyuk didn't understand. He didn't remember that he didn't have money. Ji-hyuk is going to give it a shot just because of this kind dude, but he needs to keep the terms they discussed a secret and try to persuade them. Of course, the guy agrees. Finally, Kim brought everyone in, and the bespectacled guy was finally able to look at his awakened saviors too. Jong-hyuk and his friends were also there. Kim turned to his friends, introducing Jong-hyuk as the one they'd use to take down that F-ranked fool easily. Jong-hyuk finally started to save time, saying that today they were going to make a deal with that guy. By the way, Jong-hyuk tried using that skeleton too. It's super convenient and cheap. It makes you wonder why people even hire real porters. But the situation's a bit different. Jong-hyuk asked him to look at something. Jong-hyuk was unhappy that Ji-hyuk was making a lot of money. And that's why Jong-hyuk was going to stand up for the porters. Jong-hyuk smiled wryly and said that now they would discuss their plan where the regular porters would provoke Ji-hyuk, and the heroes themselves would come to his defense and draw the public's attention to the fact that he was attacking people. Kim was perfectly happy with the plan, saying he would be exposed as the aggressor, saying there was only one end in sight for Kim. Jong-hyuk did say that after that his commission would be raised from 15 to 25%. Which made Kim ask him to wait, since that wasn't part of their deal anymore. Jong-hyuk did start to stress Kim out, asking if Kim thought he was such an idiot for trying to punish an awakened man for free. Does Kim really want to lose her entire job or just give 25% of her income to him? It's your choice, Kim. Kim immediately shut up and asked Jong-hyuk to take action. Then Jong-hyuk slapped his friend on the shoulder and said he made a good choice, and then walked off into the sunset with a smile on his face. Kim returned to his companions, shaking with anger, and the companions were outraged that Kim had agreed to a 25% commission. How the hell were they supposed to survive? Kim asked them to shut up. It wasn't his fault, it was Ji-hyuk's, and if he wasn't here, they wouldn't even have to ask these assholes to help them. Ji-hyuk suggested that they get the hell out of here, but good luck on their way. It was too damn dangerous. At that moment, a smart dude shows up and tells everyone to calm down, saying that their way is wrong and it's not the way out. Then Kim started to get mad at the smart dude, asking why the hell he was here again. But the guy said he saw everything and had already met him personally before. But Kim thought it was a betrayal, to which the smart dude tried to change his mind. The smart dude explained that he had only met him in an open conversation, which then forced them to find a way to work things out. The dude started to explain that there must be a way for them to work together even with summons. It's too much for one person to handle. But Kim wasn't happy with that solution. He thought it was pathetic. Why the hell should they trust an unknown person who took their job? But the smart dude tried to explain to him that he didn't talk to him much, but he clearly isn't a bad person. The smart dude started asking them to trust him since they definitely know their friend Chan-su. Of course, everyone could trust Chan-su. He's one of the people they couldn't make money without. This made Kim start to get even angrier and ask everyone to get a grip. After all, they need to protect their own honor and pride. But still Chan-su's friends were willing to trust him, to which Kim was outraged because they had decided to back down. But Kim promised that by leaving, they would doom themselves to no work in the future. Kim and Seo strolled down the street, where he was already picking out a delicious dinner, and Seo was imagining delicious meat in her head. Suddenly, Ji-hyuk's path is blocked by Kim. Ji-hyuk is finally glad that it's the same porters who will try to catch him. Kim resents Chan-soo for telling him everything, but Ji-hyuk says he didn't tell him anything. All he did was ask him for a favor, so he offered him a part-time job. The other porters were shocked to hear that they would get real jobs, but Ji-hyuk said that only those who followed Chan-soo would get jobs, and Ji-hyuk was only going to play with them for a while. Ji-hyuk creates a magic circle and then abruptly releases chains all over the battlefield and says that everyone who is hiding should stop doing so now. He abruptly pulls some assholes out from behind the bushes, and Jong-hyuk finally starts to realize what they are doing. Ji-hyuk looks coldly at Jong-hyuk, saying that he knows all about him. He'll recognize Jong-hyuk. "You're the enemy of my employee, aren't you?" Behind him stood the cute Chan-soo, and Ji-hyuk claimed that he was going to start looking for him already, but was too lazy. How lucky Ji-hyuk is. That really surprises Jong-hyuk, and Ji-hyuk clenches his hands and covers himself with an aura, saying that now they'll start having fun, won't they? Ji-hyuk starts squeezing Jong-hyuk's chains as hard as possible, saying that this will happen when someone gets in the way of him doing his job. "Hey, look at your face. Isn't that a cool vibe, isn't it?" Ji-hyuk starts throwing Jong-hyuk from side to side, saying that he's gone too far, and Jong-hyuk will make sure he never even thinks about interfering with him again. Ji-hyuk calls his friends, and finally, the game begins. The skeletons began to creepily touch the monster's face. Chan-soo looked at the suffering Jong-hyuk, and Ji-hyuk was now convinced that revenge had been accomplished. Success. Ji-hyuk gave those bastards who tried him to harm a proper scare with undead enhanced by illusion magic, and as a bonus, he even fixed their shabby appearances out of kindness. He could say it was a perfectly peaceful resolution. After a while, the carriers were already thanking Ji-hyuk, especially our smart guy who had successfully saved his friends. But the smart guy couldn't understand what Ji-hyuk had done to those guys, so Ji-hyuk started to remember, and then he said that he had warned them in a friendly way not to do that ever again. Anyway, they move on the main topic. The hourly rate Ji-hyuk offering is slightly lower, at 25,000 KRW, but let Ji-hyuk clear about thing he'll never run out of work again. But why? Because now there's Ji-hyuk's new invention, the state-of-the-art six-legged transport skeleton, MK.4. The other transporters couldn't figure out what the hell it was, and so events are being moved to the city, where more experienced hunters were discussing the transport skeletons in the next town are supposed to be amazing. Everyone's flocking there because of how convenient they are. Everyone was in anticipation until the sound of the skeleton was heard, where they turned around and saw a familiar transport with a girl with big eyes. The girl offers the hunters a look at the carrier. Their team consists of him, the team leader, and 2 transport skeletons. The price is 120,000 KRW per hour. They never heard of people being part of the deal. The Awakened didn't understand. Can't they just rent skeletons? Alas, they are at least part of the deal. Now, the Awakened didn't understand. Should they pay for 1 extra person? It's not expensive. Why not give it a try for the experience? Are they really that greedy? Yes, they decided to give it a try. So the girl kept shining her smile and thanking them for making the deal. Then a time skip happens where the heroes find themselves in a dungeon, where she successfully did her job and quickly collected loot in a skeleton, saving a lot of time for the other Awakened, which in the end, everyone thought was a pretty useful feature. An Awakened even declared that she was great, giving her a thumbs up. Now the Awakened were eager to try it out again. Meanwhile, Ji-hyuk and his zombie assistant stood in their new apartment, began dominating the lowest levels of the monster byproduct industry. The skeletons began dominating the lowest levels of the monster byproduct industry. Still, something Ji-hyuk didn't like. He examined his skeletons. Thinking back to how undead were looked down upon in Saron, just thinking about it, Ji-hyuk makes angry. Anyway, Ji-hyuk has been hesitant about increasing the number of porters until now, since it's not for combat people seems surprisingly okay with it. But honestly, Ji-hyuk doesn't like to mass-produce these and rake in the money, but that would inevitably draw attention, and if that happens, his peaceful retirement life would be over. Still, summoners can only summon 10 creatures, which is what he expected. If he adds some more summoned creatures, he will attract a lot of attention. Suddenly, he hears a strange sound from the zombie assistant's phone, and then Ji-hyuk leaves a little surprise on the girl's head. What is it that you're watching? Idol videos? Really? Ji-hyuk starts looking at his phone, realizing that these idols make tons of money just from straight work. and he just wants to make money easily and quietly and enjoy the comfort. Jihak bought something and then told the man that he was going to increase the number of monster bones he can buy. Jihak also made a huge purchase, which we will learn about in the next part. Good luck, everyone. So, Jihak's search for a way to get rich has led him to idols. He's realized that popularity is the key. After all, you don't have to be a celebrity to be famous if you're rich enough. People will notice you. But if Jihak is already getting attention, why not make the most of it? Jihak decided to strike while the iron was hot. He immediately grabbed his phone and started dialing. When he finally got through to his employees, he said, "Starting tomorrow, we're increasing the amount of monster bones we buy." The voice on the other end asked, "By how much?" Jihak, glancing at his phone's balance, already had the answer. Jihak decided to spend his damn 32 million won. He announced that from now on, he would invest every profit into buying more bones. He also instructed his team to handle the bones as carefully as possible. Chief Pak, the wholesaler, assured him that he would now collect the freshest bones available. With the bone-buying business settled, Jihak realized he needed a proper company to manage everything. Instead of renting a warehouse, starting a company, and distributing bones daily, Jihak decided to go all out. He wanted to roll out everything at once. Meanwhile, at the Gate Management Bureau, specifically in the office of the Awakened Registration Director, Young Sunday Han, a routine check was underway. Young asked if there was anything notable to report. A researcher initially said there was nothing special, but then mentioned something that caught his attention. A special management case involving Jihak, who creates transporter skeletons. Recent records showed that Jihak had produced 32 skeletons last month. Director Young asked why this was being brought up now. The researcher explained that Jihak had recently started a company called Saren, which was scheduled to open today. Impressed, Director Young remarked that success depends on how a person utilizes their abilities. He added that no one could have imagined using weak skeletons in such a clever way, and noted that Jihak must now have a substantial amount of money if he's starting a company. The researcher informed him that Jihak's monthly earnings could reach billions of Korean won, given that his summoning rate had exceeded all limits. He suggested removing Jihak from the special management list. Their discussion was interrupted when another researcher rushed in, excitedly asking Director Young if he'd heard the news. Director Young assumed he was referring to Jihak and his company, saying he just heard about it. However, the researcher clarified that it wasn't about the transporter skeletons, it was about Jihak recently summoning a large number of transporters and deploying them randomly. Director Young commented that this meant the number 32 wasn't his maximum, and Jihak had likely set a new record. The first researcher added that Jihak had broken the record from a month ago, as his previous summoning count had reached 27, which was astonishing. He proposed keeping Jihak on the special management list for monitoring. However, the second researcher objected vehemently, slamming the desk in frustration. Director Young asked, "What's the number now?" He wanted to know how many skeletons Jihak had summoned to cause such a commotion. The researcher replied that the count wasn't 30 or even 62. He revealed that Jihak had summoned 300 skeletons, and that was only what they had been able to observe so far. Director Young and the researchers immediately headed to Jihak's company headquarters. As soon as they stepped out of the car, the director was stunned by the sight before him. Hundreds of skeletons were spread across the area. The researcher informed him that he had just finished surveying the site and confirmed that the number of skeletons had already surpassed 350. Director Young asked where Jihak was, and the researcher replied that he was inside the warehouse. When the director entered the warehouse, he discovered even more skeletons. Jihak noticed the visitors and told his workers to take a break, as it was also lunchtime. Addressing the director, he suggested providing a lavish meal to celebrate their first task and handed him his card. Then, Jihak turned to Director Young and asked if he was from the management office. He introduced himself as Han Jihak. One of the researchers approached and asked Jihak if he remembered him, reminding him that he had conducted his. Jihak responded that he did remember him. The researcher noticed SAA standing next to Jihak and asked about her. Jihak explained that she was his cousin and had come to help with the work. The researcher greeted SAA and then asked Jihak if all the skeletons present were actual summons. Jihak confirmed this. The researcher informed him that their team had recorded over 350 skeletons. Ji-Huk replied that this was likely accurate. The researcher then questioned whether Ji-Huk had lied during the evaluation test. Ji-Huk firmly denied this, explaining that he had never expected to summon such a large number. Director Young intervened, instructing Ji-Huk to stop his activities immediately. He explained that summoning 100 skeletons was already impressive, but surpassing 350 exceeded natural and logical boundaries. He noted that an F-class awakened shouldn't be capable of such feats. Confidently, Ji-Huk asked why he should stop. Director Young stated that the issue was evident and considered the situation problematic. Ji-Huk interrupted, asserting that it wasn't a problem for him. He pointed out that he had consulted a lawyer while establishing his company to review all summoning-related laws. Ji-Huk clarified that the laws don't impose a limit on the number of summons. Director Young countered by mentioning safety precautions. Ji-Huk reassured him, emphasizing that these were the same skeletons he had been using before without any objections. He questioned why the matter was being raised now. Director Young quietly asked the researcher if there was any issue with letting Ji-Huk continue. The researcher responded that the laws had never anticipated such large-scale summoning. Ji-Huk cut in, stating that his company had been established legally and lawfully. He referenced the special law allowing the rental of abilities for profit, adding that safety wasn't a concern since those who used the skeletons could vouch for their reliability. Therefore, there was no problem. Summoning 300 skeletons daily was no easy task. Sarcastically, he commented that he wanted to retire to stop working. Yet now he had to work even harder to achieve that retirement. As he was lost in thought, the sound of a knock on the door interrupted him. Manager Kang entered the room, looking flustered. He informed Gu about a major problem happening outside. Curious about the issue, Gu asked Kang to explain. Kang revealed that a large number of porters from other regions were protesting outside the company. Shocked by the mention of protests, Gu instructed Kang to act quickly. The demonstration was sparked by the rise of skeletal transporters, which led to significant losses for human porters. People found these skeletons to be a more cost-effective and efficient option, making human porters unnecessary. The porters felt that their job opportunities were already limited by automation, but now, this situation had completely destroyed their livelihoods, forcing them to travel to distant gates for work. They accused the company, Siron, of stealing their jobs by using skeletal transporters and demanded that CEO Hanji Gu protect their rights. When Gu appeared before the protesters, he addressed them respectfully, assuring them that he understood their concerns, and invited them to come inside for a calm discussion. Inside the meeting room, Gu acknowledged that their protest was about job-related issues and asked them to share their grievances. The leader of the protest explained that the porters were struggling because of the overwhelming presence of skeletal transporters in the market. He added that many had to work in remote locations due to the decline in available jobs. Now, let's dive into how Gu plans to tackle this problem and support the human porters. The problem could not be solved, and as such, Gu simply decided to stop producing skeletons to give regular people a chance to make money. He asked manager Kang to bring some papers and pens, and Kang eagerly complied. Thrilled that the issue had been resolved smoothly and peacefully, Kang looked at Gu with admiration, seeing him as a remarkable leader capable of handling crises without causing harm to anyone. Having reduced the impact of the skeletal transporter project, Gu began to think of new ways to earn money. He wanted to find a new product that could be easily produced, one unrelated to combat like the skeletons, and that wouldn't threaten existing jobs. Recalling Kang's description of him as a considerate and respectful leader, Gu felt frustrated by his seemingly endless bad luck. While jotting down ideas and specifications for the new product, something caught his attention and sparked a new idea. He noticed that the pen he was writing with had the label, "Made in China." Checking his notebook, he found the same phrase printed on it. Even his coffee mug carried the same label. Suddenly, an idea struck him like a bolt of lightning. Why not produce items that are currently imported from abroad? This would eliminate concerns about competition from other countries. A few days later, at a nearby shoe factory close to the Siron company, director Kim Deok-bae was reflecting on the factory's rich history, passed down through generations. However, he admitted that he was facing tough times competing with China's low production costs. Director Kim was worried about managing labor costs as he pondered a critical decision. Suddenly, His secretary rushed in and asked if he had heard about the skeletons and the Siron Company in the industrial complex. Director Kim responded that he had indeed heard of the company and felt a twinge of envy. They seemed able to turn a profit effortlessly. He wished he could find a way to change his own life too. Just then, a voice interrupted him, disagreeing with the idea that they were merely lucky. To his surprise, it was Gu, who introduced himself and expressed his pleasure in meeting Director Kim. Gu shared that he had recently taken an interest in the factory and wanted to learn more about its operations, as he was considering acquiring it. Director Kim was taken aback by Gu's bold statement, but quickly recognized it as a golden opportunity. He eagerly agreed and offered to give Gu a tour of the factory to explain everything, starting with a walk through the main areas. As they walked, Director Kim explained the processes involved in manufacturing shoes, expressing his desire to sell the factory for the benefit of the workers. He elaborated on how the first step included using the machines in the back to cut out the individual parts of the shoes. Next, the parts were sewn together using the available machines. Gu commented that the machines looked a bit outdated. Director Kim, feeling a bit embarrassed, assured him that the workers were highly skilled and could handle the machine's limitations. He pointed out that this was actually better than relying on faulty modern machines. Gu appreciated this point and encouraged him to continue. Director Kim explained that after the workers finished making the shoes, all the pieces were assembled and stitched together in one place. He mentioned that while the process seemed simple, it got more complicated when you looked at the details. Gu turned to Seiya and said the work seemed manageable and much easier than producing combat equipment. He then asked Director Kim if all the work was done by hand or if there were any machines involved. Director Kim replied that while the cutting process could be automated, everything else was done manually. He expressed some concern about the ratio of workers to production. If Gu wanted to run the factory at full capacity, he would need to hire more staff. Right now, they had 20 workers, but at one point, the number had reached as high as 100. Gu remarked that 100 workers seemed like a good number and asked how sales were managed. Director Kim explained that most of their production was based on client orders. This gives the audience a clear and engaging understanding of the factory's operations and challenges, while keeping it simple and relatable. The factory adjusted its basic designs to meet specific needs. Gu asked if they could produce inventory in advance and sell it later. Director Kim replied that it was possible, but warned that unsold stock could lead to losses. He added that predicting demand for small shoe factories like theirs was tough. Gu chuckled, saying that Director Kim was refreshingly honest. Director Kim laughed back, saying he had nothing to hide. Gu then inquired if they could produce large quantities of low-cost shoes for export using inexpensive labor. Director Kim explained that it wasn't that simple because major brands choose countries with low-cost labor for specific reasons. Gu clarified that his question might have been misunderstood and asked for a straightforward answer. Would the idea work or not? Director Kim replied that it likely would, as cheap products always find a market. Satisfied with this answer, Gu told Director Kim he was ready to buy the factory immediately. He prepared the necessary paperwork and asked if the factory was officially his now. Director Kim reviewed the documents and was deeply moved when he saw that Gu had kept him on as the factory's director while retaining all the existing employees. He thanked Gu profusely and promised to do his best to secure orders and find new clients. He assured Gu that he would repay his kindness one day. Gu told Director Kim that there was no need for so much gratitude because he already planned to build up inventory and sell it directly through exports. He then used his summoning ability to call forth. Gu introduces the skeletons to Director Kim as the factory's new employees. He asks Director Kim to teach them the details of the work, assuring him that they will follow orders without hesitation. Touched by this gesture, Director Kim describes Gu as an angel rather than a human. The skeletons immediately begin working as soon as Director Kim gives the required commands. He remarks that the factory hasn't been this lively in a long time and credits the revival to the new CEO. Gu responds modestly, saying there's no need for such praise since it's Director Kim who resolved all the issues. Director Kim admits he was initially surprised and never expected skeletons to be employed in the factory. He asks Gu if this is even legal. Gu assures him that they are not breaking any laws. He then shifts the focus, suggesting they examine the shoes being produced and evaluate their quality. Director Kim inspects the shoe and admits it's better than he expected, although not on par with handmade craftsmanship. Gu asks Director Kim to stop giving vague answers and point out exactly what the problems are and what needs to be corrected. Director Kim highlights that the stitching is weak and has gaps. Gu promptly addresses the issue by giving new instructions to the skeletons. Afterward, a new shoe is produced, and Gu presents it to Director Kim for inspection, eager to see if it meets the standards. In this segment, Director Kim confirms that all the flaws he pointed out have been fixed. Gu expresses his satisfaction, saying that if they keep learning from their mistakes, the shoes will become easy to sell. The best part? The skeletons don't require any labor costs, which saves a lot of money in production. Director Kim agrees, highlighting that cutting down on labor costs is a huge win. This improvement allows them to compete with Chinese products in terms of price, even in the export markets. He adds that if they keep building their reputation, they could land OEM, original equipment manufacturer contracts with major brands. Surprised, Gu asks about these contracts. He thought big brands made their products themselves. Director Kim explains that these brands usually focus on design, while factories like theirs take care of manufacturing and delivery. Gu is amazed, realizing that they don't need to create any new designs. They just need to focus on making high-quality shoes. As time goes by, the Siron shoe factory buzzes with activity, handling more and more orders. They even acquire a few other shoe factories to expand their operations, keeping Gu incredibly busy around the clock. At the end of another tiring workday, Gu comes home, reflecting on all the progress they've made. As Gu is settling in for the night, he receives a call from Director Kim. Kim apologizes for calling so late, but has news about a new order that requires changes to the production lines. Tired but determined, Gu assures Director Kim that he will head back to the factory right away. Kim feels a bit embarrassed for bringing up the adjustments so late, especially since they had nearly finished the previous order. Gu realizes that the growing workload is taking a toll not just on the business, but also on the team. He thinks about training a new person to help out, but quickly acknowledges that they don't have the time or energy for that. Training someone would be a big effort. Increasing the number of skeletons isn't an easy fix either. It's becoming harder to find new corpses, and bringing in more might attract attention. If people found out Gu was using skeletons, it could hurt his reputation. He still needs to refine the basic framework and get the required work units ready. While thinking about this, Gu suddenly comes up with a brand new idea. A few days later, the factory holds a day dedicated to interviewing new employees, including a candidate named Beck. Gu asks Sang-ho to sit down and starts going over his resume. He notices that Sang-ho doesn't have much experience. Gu notices that Sang-ho's experience mostly comes from part-time jobs. He asks Sang-ho if he has any special skills. Sang-ho feels nervous, realizing he doesn't have any standout abilities. He hesitates, unsure if the skills needed should relate directly to the job. Seeing Sang-ho's long silence, Gu reassures him that it's not a big deal. Suddenly, Sang-ho blurts out that he has a special skill. When Gu asks what it is, Sang-ho hesitantly admits he's good at games. Feeling embarrassed, Sang-ho wonders why he brought it up. Gu asks what makes him skilled at games, and Sang-ho reluctantly explains that he plays all kinds of games and can easily reach top rankings. However, he thinks it might be better to stop talking to avoid rambling on. Gu follows up by asking if he enjoys simulation and building games, and Sang-ho confirms that those are his favorites. Gu asks if Sang-ho has anything to showcase his skills, and Sang-ho mentions that he has some videos he can share. He opens one video and explains that the game involves assembling golem parts. But here's the exciting part: they created a flying machine using those parts and made it work. Sang-ho talks about the game's advanced physics engine. He points to a motor beneath a fan-like structure, which is actually a golem's arm piece, but it has great thrust power. He explains that designing this required creativity because he had to repurpose parts for completely different functions to build a mechanical device. Feeling uncertain about the interview, Sang-ho wonders if he should look for another company. But then Gu surprises him by enthusiastically saying he's hired on the spot. Gu asks if Sang-ho can start the next day. Overjoyed, Sang-ho confirms and thanks Gu for this amazing opportunity. On his first day, things don't start off well. Sang-ho struggles to understand a skeletal structure on the desk. Gu explains that this structure is basically like a computer, but Sang-ho is shocked and still unconvinced. Gu clarifies that the structure is actually a control unit. He begins demonstrating how the skeletal framework works on the desk, explaining that this revised script captures the excitement and challenges Sang-ho faces, making it relatable for viewers while keeping them engaged in his journey. The lever makes the skeleton move accordingly. Gu assures Sang-ho that he'll teach him how to operate it, and afterward, Sang-ho can program a gymnastics routine for the skeleton. The deadline for this task is 1 week. Despite feeling confused, Sang-ho accepts the challenge. The control unit given to Sang-ho looks like a regular game controller, but it's actually the skeleton of a deceased mage. Unlike regular skeletons, skeletal mages can use basic magic. The device has buttons and levers for operation, but the controls are a bit tricky since it was put together quickly. Surprisingly, Gu is amazed when Sang-ho completes the task 2 days before the deadline, proving he was the right choice for the job. Gu asks Sang-ho for feedback on using the device, which is still in its experimental phase, and requests that he point out any flaws or difficulties. Excitedly, Sang-ho starts listing his thoughts, and we'll find out what happens next in the next installment. Good luck! Sang-ho struggles to understand the skeletal structure on the desk. Ji-huk explains that it works like a computer, though Sang-ho remains skeptical. Ji-huk clarifies that the structure is actually a control unit. Ji-huk then demonstrates how the skeletal framework functions. Moving a lever causes the skeleton to move accordingly. He reassures Sang-ho that he will teach him how to operate it. Afterward, Sang-ho will be responsible for programming a gymnastics routine for the skeleton. The deadline for the task is 1 week. Despite his confusion, Sang-ho accepts the challenge. The control unit given to Sang-ho looks like an ordinary controller, but is actually a skeleton of a deceased mage. Unlike regular skeletons, skeletal mages can use basic magic. The device is designed with buttons and levers for operation. The controls are somewhat tricky because the unit was hastily assembled. However, Ji-huk is astonished when Sang-ho completes the task 2 days ahead of the deadline, proving that he was the right choice. Ji-huk asks for Sang-ho's feedback on using the device, which is still in its experimental phase, and requests that he point out any flaws or difficulties. Excited, Sang-ho enthusiastically lists various flaws and suggests improvements, but Ji-huk has to cut him off, promising to address those issues later. Ji-huk explains that he expects great things from Sang-ho, especially as the company's first programmer. He informs Sang-ho that when new members join, Sang-ho will be their manager, so he must work hard to prepare for training them. Deeply moved, Sang-ho nods in determination. Sang-ho sincerely thanks Ji-huk. In response, Ji-huk informs him that he has already been promoted and will receive a salary increase. Overcome with excitement, Sang-ho promises to work diligently to meet Ji-huk's expectations. He is so emotional that he is almost in tears, but Ji-huk reassures him, saying that everyone needs to give their best effort. Internally, however, Ji-huk still struggles to understand the younger generation's exaggerated reactions. The following day, Ji-huk receives a call from the registration office. They ask about the status of the shoe factory. He responds that everything is going well. Then they ask if he is using skeletons. Ji-huk confirms this and inquires if there is an issue. The caller reassures him that there is no problem, prompting Ji-huk to abruptly end the call, asking them to contact him only if there is a genuine issue. Later, Ji-huk asks Director Kim about the caller's identity. Kim explains that it was the head of the registration office, who often calls over minor concerns. However, Ji-huk reassures him not to worry about it and then inquires about Sang-ho's performance and understanding of the work. Director Kim states that while Sang-ho initially faced some challenge 7, damaging a few shoes during training, has since adapted and is now performing excellently. Ji-huk expresses his satisfaction with this news and suggests that, since Sang-ho has acclimated, it would be best to hire another programmer to work alongside him. Director Kim agrees and assures him that the job opening will be posted immediately. Ji-huk then asks about the status of raw materials. Director Kim replies that they might soon need to purchase additional supplies. However, he assures him that the current stock is sufficient, though the rapid expansion of their factory is surpassing expectations and circulating rumor has increased demand. Ji-huk then wonders if they can begin accepting orders from major brand companies. Director Kim hesitates, pointing out that only a month has passed since they acquired their first shoe factory. Naturally impatient, Ji-Huk expresses his eagerness. Director Kim promises to propose business deals to major companies, but clarifies that these companies are unlikely to accept offers from a modest factory like theirs. Ji-Huk questions why, given that their products are more cost-effective than any competitors. Director Kim explains that cost is not the only factor. Trust plays a crucial role for major brands, and they have not yet proven themselves worthy of such trust. Ji-Huk asks if their production capabilities are insufficient, but Director Kim denies this, assuring him that their operations are now more precise than human production. Smiling, Ji-Huk remarks that all they need is an opportunity to prove themselves. He proposes launching a massive advertising campaign under the slogan, "Shoes made by skeletons." He emphasizes that this slogan alone will be enough to make their name known and attract the attention of major brands. Before proceeding, Ji-Huk asks what Suya is doing with the skeleton nearby. He notices it has been painted pink and dressed in eccentric clothing, resembling a rock star. Ji-Huk knocks on Suya's head and instructs her to restore the skeleton to its original state, warning her of consequences otherwise. Suddenly, he has an idea and decides to test it. He asks Suya to leave the skeleton as it is, finding it cute and potentially useful for their marketing efforts. The skeletons in this factory were a bit less intimidating than usual, which was a pleasant surprise for many. At one point, a group of visitors came to tour the place, with a guard guiding them around. He explained that they'd get a chance to see the skeletons at work, and the visitors were genuinely impressed. They expected the skeletons to be scary, but instead, they found them unexpectedly charming. The guard also offered them souvenir shoes for just 6,000 each. The visitors were shocked by how high quality the shoes were for the price, though the design was a bit unusual. The laces had small skulls on them, which some found odd. The guard reassured them that if they didn't like the skulls, they could easily remove them. One visitor was so excited that they wanted to buy 4 pairs, but the guard apologized, saying the limit was 1 pair per person. The visitor agreed, happily purchasing just 1 pair. The video quickly went viral on social media, gaining massive views and bringing Sarin Company a lot of attention and recognition. Not long after, Director Kim walked into Ju's office with exciting news. The documents they'd been waiting for had finally arrived. Kim handed Ju the papers, which turned out to be a job request from Roku, a top 20 global sports brand. Ju was thrilled that such a big company was interested, and immediately told Director Kim to start preparing samples. When Roku's representative arrived, they started inspecting the samples and were amazed by their flawless quality, especially considering the surprisingly low price. The representative told Ju that they would present the samples to the company's management for further consideration. As the representative evaluated the samples, Ji-Huk asked if he thought the company would approve them. The representative hesitated, explaining that he couldn't predict the outcome. He pointed out that while the price was very competitive, the idea of using skeletons to make shoes hadn't been widely accepted in the market yet. Ji-Huk pressed on, asking about the contract terms. The representative seemed surprised by the question, but Ji-Huk quickly clarified that they needed to be prepared for whatever came next. The representative explained that the company was currently looking for temporary solutions, so the contract terms might not be ideal. This didn't sit well with Ji-Huk, who asked if that meant they were expecting further price cuts. Director Kim stepped in, clarifying that the representative was talking about the contract duration and the relatively small order quantities. Ji-Huk was taken aback by this situation, but Director Kim quickly explained that major brands usually sign long-term contracts. These contracts guarantee minimum monthly orders, providing security for manufacturers. Ji-Huk asked if this meant guaranteed minimum sales, and Kim confirmed that it did. He added that companies would receive a steady supply of products throughout the contract, and sometimes these guarantees help reduce unit costs, though that wasn't the case here. To ease Ji-Huk's concerns, the representative reassured him that he was correct, noting that Roku was in a rush to find an alternative to its halted factory. This meant the contract duration would be shorter. The representative also pointed out that the guaranteed quantities wouldn't be large, and any surplus would be added to. The representative explained that once Roku's factories resumed operations, any surplus would be added to the company's main inventory. Ji-Huk asked about the maximum expected order volume, and the representative mentioned that the contract would last only 3 months, guaranteeing less than 40,000 pairs per month, with some flexibility depending on circumstances. Ji-Huk then turned to Director Kim for his opinion on the offer. Kim pointed out that it was rare for major brands to show interest in deals like this unless smaller companies were targeting future contracts. Ji-Huk realized that sticking with low prices would keep them stuck in the planning stage, making it difficult to secure long-term contracts. He asked the representative if Roku was working with any other factories, and the representative replied that they had made offers, but no final decision had been made yet. Ji-Huk suggested shortening the contract to just 1 month. He explained that if Roko's factories resumed operations, there would be no issue, and the contract could be renewed month to month by mutual agreement, no need for guaranteed quantities or upfront payments. He emphasized that the unit price would stay the same, and if there were any quality issues or defects, they would cover the production costs. The representative listened carefully to the new terms. The representative promised to pass the new terms along to headquarters. Ji-Huk and Director Kim bid him farewell, with Ji-Huk advising him to explain everything clearly. After the representative left, Director Kim exploded, questioning whether Ji-Huk's actions were really reasonable. He pointed out that the terms Ji-Huk proposed made the deal less favorable while ensuring the contract would be signed. It left them with no orders and they wouldn't make a profit. Ji-Huk responded casually, explaining that this was exactly the point. He reminded Kim that samples were always free, and this approach allowed companies to try out their products without the risk of losses. Ji-Huk then asked Kim if he knew of any company offering a lower production cost than theirs. Kim hesitated, then admitted he didn't. Ji-Huk firmly stated that trust is earned. Ji-Huk confidently explained that their company had earned trust through consistent quality, and that Skeletons had now truly mastered this field. He added that they were the only company capable of adjusting production levels so quickly. Director Kim reluctantly agreed with his viewpoint. Ji-Huk continued, stressing that what they lacked was simply the chance to prove themselves. If offering orders for free was the price to pay, it was worth the sacrifice. He pointed out that once Roku saw the success of their products, they wouldn't just settle for a trial. After the contract ended, Roku would come back to request continued production from their factory. At Roku's headquarters in the United States, the CEO asked about the maximum production capacity they could handle. The secretary replied that they were already operating at full capacity, and increasing production would require hiring more workers, something manufacturers were hesitant to do. The secretary added that the current factories could produce up to 200,000 pairs per month, but to meet the demand for an additional 300,000 pairs, a new factory would need to be found. The director then asked about the factory in Fujian, China. The secretary explained that the factory in Fujian was requesting a 6-month contract with a guaranteed production of 200,000 pairs per month. The director also inquired about the factory in Jinjiang City, to which the secretary responded that they had agreed to a 3-month contract but were asking for an increase in the guaranteed volume. The director then told the secretary that he needed 70,000 pairs by next week. The secretary asked if the director had seen the video about the awakened individual in Korea who was managing a shoe factory with summoned monsters. The director replied that he had never heard of it and questioned its relevance. The secretary, eager to share, quickly prepared the video and asked the director to watch it, curious about his thoughts. After watching the video, the director became interested, but questioned if it was just a show by an ordinary awakened individual. The secretary explained that Roku's branch in Korea had sent the video along with meeting notes from the factory, but had expressed some concerns. The director asked if this was real, and the secretary confirmed, showing him the contract. The director was surprised to see that the contract was for 1 month, with automatic renewal, no guaranteed quantities, and double compensation in case of defects. He was even more astonished by the delivery price and asked the secretary if there was a mistake. The secretary explained that their labor costs were nearly non-existent, making the price feasible. The director then asked about product quality, and the secretary stated that the samples were of acceptable quality, with no current risks, making it worth giving the factory a chance. The secretary reassured him that even in case of defects, compensation was guaranteed. The director ordered an initial request for 10,000 pairs, starting with something manageable. At Sarin Company, Director Kim visited Ji-Huk's office to inform him that they received their first order from Roku for 10,000 pairs of shoes. Ji-Huk was thrilled, commenting that they had successfully captured the client's attention. He quickly asked if the necessary materials were available, Kim replied that they were readily available in the market and could be procured immediately upon request. Kim then asked if it would be better to halt current production and focus solely on Roko's order. Ji-Huk responded that it wasn't necessary, they could handle both the current production and Roko's order simultaneously, since the machines did most of the work. However, Kim pointed out that the stitching would be different for each part of the shoes, and the machines were already operating at full capacity. Ji-Huk expressed surprise and asked what the specific issue was. He suggested designing new stitching machines if the current ones were insufficient, emphasizing that they had the ability to manufacture them in-house. Director Kim was amazed by Ji-Huk's quick thinking and immediate solutions. Ji-Huk then asked if there was anything else they were lacking. Kim replied that they needed additional space, as the current factory and the other 5 factories didn't have enough room. Ji-Huk proposed using Saren's warehouse, noting that it was spacious enough. However, Kim seemed uneasy and informed him that manufacturing in an unregistered facility would be illegal. Here's a polished and engaging version. Ji-Huk explained that the warehouse was already registered and asked again if there was anything else they needed to arrange. Kim, impressed by Ji-Huk's preparations, replied that nothing else seemed to be missing. The next day, Roko's headquarters held an urgent meeting to discuss pressing details. The director emphasized the need to negotiate with existing factories by reducing the guaranteed production volume. However, the secretary interrupted to mention the factory producing shoes using skeletons, the same one they had communicated with the previous day. The director asked if they had been informed of an inability to fulfill the order or a desire to amend the contract. But the secretary clarified that the situation was different. He revealed that the factory had sent a notice stating they had already completed the required quantity. The director was shocked and asked if this was true. The secretary handed him an email from Roko's Korea branch and requested him to review it. The director was astonished to find that the factory had delivered all 10,000 pairs, with inspection results confirming that all pairs were high quality and defect-free. He commented that the price, quantity, and speed were unbelievable, wondering if this was their real opportunity. The secretary replied that if the factory could complete 10,000 pairs in a single day, it was certain they could handle even larger orders. He added that the contract didn't specify a guaranteed quantity and lasted just 1 month, making it an ideal solution for their current problem. The director smiled and instructed the secretary to place a new order for all. This version keeps the focus on key moments, making the flow clear and maintaining intrigue for the audience. The quantities needed for the following week were emphasized, with the director noting that this time there would be multiple models to ensure every detail could be verified. The new order reached Saren, consisting of 60,000 pairs of shoes, divided among 7 different models. Director Kim remarked that this order felt like a test, especially since the client had inquired about the factory's maximum production capacity. Ji-Huk smiled cunningly and said that the 60,000 pairs might bring a new surprise. He pulled out his phone and called Mr. Park, asking if it was possible to provide a ton of bones. Mr. Park enthusiastically confirmed that it was possible and promised to deliver them as quickly as possible in just 2 days. Saren completed the entire order in just 2 days, and the news reached the director's office at Roko's headquarters. After this order, everything ran smoothly, and Roko placed an additional order for 880,000 pairs to be delivered within a week. This order, too, was perfectly completed in just 2 days. The following week, here's the refined version. Roko requested 150,000 pairs of shoes, which were delivered within 4 days. Thanks to Saren's efforts, the gap caused by Roko's factory closures was filled, and the company's previous issues were resolved. The secretary informed the director that the factories which had been shut down resumed operations faster than expected. One of the attendees in the office commented that this was good news, but pointed out that Roko's production profits had increased significantly during this period. He added that their production quality was more consistent than any other factory, and that their ability to adjust production using skeletons was exceptionally efficient. Addressing the director, the secretary mentioned that contracts with other factories cost Roko hundreds of thousands of dollars annually, but partnering with Saren would completely change the situation. He added that products would be delivered immediately after placing orders, significantly reducing losses from excess inventory. The director agreed with this view and emphasized the need to sign a formal contract with Saren. The next day, Roko's representative visited Ji-Huk too. Ji-Huk sarcastically commented that he had expected them to eventually come themselves to offer a formal contract. The representative replied that upon reading the contract, Ji-Huk would find it to be a formal one-year agreement, guaranteeing up to 150,000 pairs per month, a type of contract that would impress even major manufacturers. Ji-Huk requested to read the contract carefully and began reviewing it. However, he noticed something unusual and turned to Director Kim, asking if he thought the contract was suitable or if there were any concerns. After reading it, Ji-Huk felt that something wasn't right and asked Director Kim to read it as well. Kim started reading the contract intently, but a puzzled expression appeared on his face. Ji-Huk told him that he was certain there were several flaws in the contract and asked him to identify them. Kim replied that he saw no issues with the contract, explaining that the only point not explicitly written was the quantities required for each model, but it did not violate company policies. He added that the rest of the clauses were standard terms found in any contract. However, Ji-Huk seemed unconvinced. He took the papers again and asked to reread the standard clauses Kim had mentioned. While reading, Ji-Huk pointed out specific terms in the contract, such as a clause stating that any damage or loss unrelated to the responsibility of Party A would be borne by Party B, including paying compensation. He also noted a clause stating that the clause also stated that if Party B caused delivery delays, they would bear the penalty. Neither of them was surprised by these terms, but Ji-Huk drew their attention to a past incident where a factory was shut down due to political upheaval. He asked if they would still have to pay compensation in such a case. The representative confirmed that this was correct according to the contract, and that Party B would bear the responsibility. He added that headquarters had provided some discounts to ease the burden. Ji-Huk picked up his pen and declared that he had made his decision. He crossed out the compensation clause in the contract and handed it over, stating that they were not obligated to cater to other companies' demands, which was why he removed that clause. When the representative took the paper, Ji-Huk told him that this was the only condition under which he would sign the contract. The representative responded that the president would never agree to such terms. Ji-Huk asked why they would refuse, insisting that as long as Roko didn't scrutinize the contract too much, there would be no issues. He added that he would send these offers to all factories under the same conditions, and whichever one accepted the contract would be prioritized for orders. When Ji-Huk heard the word discounts, he became visibly angry. He clarified that what he meant was that the compensation had already been paid forcibly, not voluntarily. The representative responded calmly, saying that such occurrences were normal in this industry. He explained that as long as the product was defect-free and production ran smoothly, there should be no issue with these terms. He continued, acknowledging that he understood this was Ji-Huk's first contract, which likely caused. His hesitation was clear, but the representative assured him that this type of contract was the most common in the industry. He added that if Ji-Huk couldn't agree to these terms, it would make it difficult to sign contracts with other companies. He urged Ji-Huk not to worry, emphasizing that everything would be fine. He clarified that these terms were included only as a precaution in case any problems arose. Ji-Huk interrupted, stating that he had been told something similar during a trip abroad. Back then, he was reassured that everything would proceed smoothly and that there was nothing to worry about. However, once he experienced it firsthand, he realized things were far more complex than he had imagined. He explained that there were many aspects to consider, not just the ones that were highlighted as important. He recounted how, during that trip, he inadvertently offended the son of a high-ranking company official, which caused a significant uproar. The company had considered disciplinary action against him, but refrained because he was the one keeping the company from collapsing at that moment. At that moment, Ji-Huk realized something crucial. Those who followed every instruction to the letter were often the ones who didn't understand the full scope of the situation. Often perceived as naive, Ji-Huk emphasized that it was better for a person to handle matters their own way, regardless of industry standards or external expectations. Back in the present, Ji-Huk told Director Kim that they had delivered hundreds of thousands of high-quality products in just 2 months. He asked if that was enough to prove themselves to Roko, and Kim agreed. Ji-Huk continued, explaining that while these terms might seem heavy and tedious, once his company started receiving orders, they would work tirelessly to deliver them as quickly as possible. He concluded by stating that if Roko liked these terms, he was ready to sign immediately, leaving the decision in their hands. The scene then shifted to Roko's CEO, who appeared visibly frustrated while reading the terms. The staff commented that this situation was humiliating and that they could not allow a small company to dictate terms to them in this way. They acknowledged that their profits had increased thanks to Saren, but not by a significant margin. Another employee countered, arguing that this was an opportunity that could not be ignored, as the benefits of working with Saren were limitless. He argued that letting pride prevent them from achieving financial stability would be irrational. The debate grew more heated, with one employee warning that agreeing to such terms would undoubtedly cause issues in future contracts. Overwhelmed by the ongoing discussions, the CEO decided to end the meeting for the day. He stated that since their factory had resumed normal operations, they would continue monitoring the situation and take action based on future developments. However, the impact of the debate soon became clear when an employee approached the CEO to inform him that the CEO was frustrated. He was told by an employee that the factory wanted to add a new clause to the contract to increase the production of the DP10 model. The employee mentioned that it was too early to discuss this, but the CEO was angry. He slammed his hand on the desk and questioned why they were tolerating such complicated terms. He complained that the supply price was too high and the requirements were too complex. He added, "If we had signed with Kron, production would have started by now." Despite his frustration, the CEO knew deep down that the factory's request was reasonable. But he couldn't stop comparing Saren to other factories. Just then, another employee entered with bad news. Defects were found in the Chinese factory's products, and they needed to be remade. The CEO was shocked. The employee explained that the amount needing remanufacturing wasn't large, but it would delay delivery. According to the contract, the factory would pay for the remanufacturing, but there weren't enough products available until it was finished. The CEO took a deep breath and muttered, "If we were working with Saren, this wouldn't have happened." He asked the employee for an update on Saren's status. The employee replied that Saren had already sent proposals to several other factories, and some were interested in signing contracts after receiving samples. The CEO's eyes lit up. He knew this was big. Saren's results are getting attention. "The first contract always gets priority production," he said. "Get the contract finalized with them now." The employee hesitated, unsure if the timing was right. The CEO, now impatient, raised his voice. "Do it immediately. If another manufacturer signs with Saren first, we'll lose out on our orders." Roko moved forward with the contract, and the results were clear: profits tripled. Soon after, other factories started following Roko's lead, signing contracts with Saren. Director Kim cheerfully shared that this month alone, the company had already received over 1 million orders. Ji-Huk was thrilled, especially since the success came just 1 month after signing the contract with Roko. He started daydreaming about how his factory had gained fame so quickly and imagined millions of future contracts rolling in. He joked that all they needed now were more skeletons, and the money would come pouring in automatically. But then, Director Kim told Ji-Huk that a company had approached them about making clothing as well. Ji-Huk, eager but cautious, asked if this new venture would require as much manual labor as the shoe manufacturing. Director Kim grinned slyly and said it would actually take much more labor than making shoes. Without missing a beat, Ji-Huk stood up and made a bold decision. "Let's open a clothing factory alongside the shoe one." He asked Director Kim if they could scale up and open factories to meet any demand, confident that they could fulfill it. Any request they received, Director Kim responded with excitement, saying it was a fantastic idea. After all, they had already succeeded with the shoe factory, so any new project would be a walk in the park. He pointed out that the person managing everything was none other than Ji-Huk himself, not just anyone. Ji-Huk smiled confidently and declared, "I've made my decision. I want to start making this happen right away." He boldly stated that no one would ever see Chinese factories the same way again, as his factories would soon lead the industry. About 6 months later, Ji-Huk launched factories for clothing, hats, and even accessories. He focused on labor-intensive products, setting his company apart from the competition. However, things weren't without their challenges. Director Kim updated Ji-Huk, saying that while the shoe factory was running smoothly, the other factories had long periods of inactivity, especially with the skeleton production. He then shared an idea to improve the skeleton process. Director Kim suggested merging the factories to make better use of idle workers. allowing them to shift between factories once their main tasks were finished. The challenge, however, was the lack of space to implement this. He explained that all the factories they had bought were small. Once the necessary equipment was set up, space became so cramped that even the core tasks couldn't be done efficiently. Ji-Huk leaned back, resting his head on the desk, realizing this was a serious problem. Director Kim agreed and proposed that the best solution would be to purchase a large factory as soon as they had enough funds. But Ji-Huk saw an even bigger issue. His exhaustion from the mounting problems was becoming clear. Director Kim noticed the tiredness on his face and asked, "Are you still with me, Ji-Huk?" Ji-Huk took a deep breath and adjusted himself in his seat. Ji-Huk straightened up and reassured Director Kim that he was paying attention. He then lazily admitted that his biggest problem was losing his passion. Since the global factories started generating massive profits, he had become incredibly sluggish. Director Kim noticed how drained Ji-Huk seemed and suggested he go home and rest if he wasn't feeling well. Ji-Huk's face brightened, and he eagerly asked, "Are you serious?" Kim laughed and shook his head, saying it was impossible. There were too many reports to finish, so he couldn't leave his desk. Ji-Huk sighed and said that he hadn't always felt this way, but Kim didn't quite understand. Kim reassured him that the remaining reports weren't urgent and could easily be pushed to the next day. He then suggested Ji-Huk rest for a while in the office, if he wanted. Ji-Huk stood up, grateful for the chance to take a break, when suddenly an alert came through. It was about a nearby gate opening, signaling an emergency evacuation. Without missing a beat, Ji-Huk issued orders for the staff to begin evacuation procedures. The evacuation began, and staff quickly left the premises. Director Kim, looking curious, asked what kind of monsters might emerge from the gate so they could prepare an appropriate response. One nervous employee answered, "The monsters will be skeletons." A news helicopter hovered above the gate, reporting that a team of awakened individuals had arrived and started fighting the skeletons. However, it seemed that the situation would take longer to resolve than expected. The scene shifted to the awakened fighters, struggling against the relentless skeletons. Despite their best efforts, the skeletons proved overwhelmingly powerful, and the team was working desperately to prevent the creatures from spreading into the city. Meanwhile, Ji-Huk, along with SAA, decided to go observe the situation firsthand. Ji-Huk arrived at the scene and, observing the situation closely, felt he had made the right choice. His gut feeling about the situation had been spot on. As he watched, it became clear that the skeletons being fought by the awakened team were the exact same ones he had created. Ji-Huk analyzed the situation, noting that there appeared to be about 100 skeletons in the squad, led by a commander. He felt relieved to have discovered the situation in time. He also realized that the skeletons were still in an exploratory phase, which explained why they hadn't caused significant damage yet. Determined to regain control, Ji-Huk attempted to use his magic to control the skeletons before their reconnaissance phase ended. But to his shock, he found that his magic had no effect on them at all. Ji-Huk quickly realized this was a major problem. If the skeletons switched into combat mode, especially with their large numbers, it could spell disaster. As he was deep in thought, a massive explosion erupted, signaling the arrival of the skeleton commander. Meanwhile, the awakened fighters were struggling to fend off the skeletons. They were confused by the sudden increase in the skeleton's strength. Ji-Huk observed the chaos, certain that these skeletons were still operating under his system, but he couldn't pinpoint what was causing him to lose control over them. Desperate, he tried using his magic again, this time targeting the commander directly, hoping to take it down from a distance. But to his shock, his magic had no effect on the commander. Suddenly, the commander moved with lightning speed, attacking a rescue team member who couldn't even react in time. Ji-Huk realized he couldn't just stand by any longer. He instructed CIA to stay put and not move until he returned. After the commander severely injured the rescue team leader, a teammate rushed to help and check on his condition. But as they looked around, they realized they were completely surrounded. One of the teammates muttered, "Winning this doesn't seem possible." The battle alone was becoming impossible. The team leader apologized to his teammate for being injured due to his lapse in vigilance. Just as they were starting to lose hope, they found themselves surrounded by another group of skeletons. But this time, these skeletons seemed to be protecting them from the hostile ones. One of the rescue team members noticed something in the sky and called out to the leader. They speculated that a high-ranking awakened individual had arrived to help. The team started shouting to the newcomer, warning him about the strength of the skeletons. Ji-Huk responded coldly, "That's exactly why I'm here." He made it clear that the skeletons were disrupting his operations, and he had come to handle the situation personally. The team leader, startled by Ji-Huk's tone, remarked, "Your appearance seems different." The rescue team leader eventually recognized Ji-Huk, realizing he was the CEO of Sciron. Ji-Huk then unleashed his bone magic, summoning a swarm of bone spears that struck down every skeleton in the area. A thick cloud of smoke rose from the chaos. When the smoke cleared, not a single hostile skeleton remained standing. The rescue team leader and his companion were left speechless, unable to believe that Ji-Huk possessed more than one magical ability. The leader remarked that he had always wondered why Ji-Huk didn't create skeletons for combat, but now he understood. Ji-Huk was so powerful, he didn't need to. As Ji-Huk landed, he approached the rescue team and asked if they were okay. They thanked him, explaining that they had thought it was their final day and promised they would never forget his help. Ji-Huk smiled, saying, "I only did what I was supposed to," though in his mind, he reminded himself that these skeletons were his creations after all. The team leader, still in awe, admitted that he hadn't known Ji-Huk possessed such unique abilities. He thanked Ji-Huk again, emphasizing that if he hadn't been there, the entire area would have been destroyed. He also mentioned that the skeletons were behaving with unusual intelligence, which was highly unusual. He had never imagined seeing anything like it. The leader pointed out one skeleton in particular, noting that it seemed to be their commander. He asked Ji-Huk for his opinion on the matter, especially since Ji-Huk was an expert in skeletons. Ji-Huk's expression grew tense. He didn't know how to respond without diving into further discussion. To avoid it, he opened a magical portal and shifted the focus, saying, "It's not important right now. The priority is to evacuate the injured." The leader thanked Ji-Huk again, mentioning that he would visit him soon. He then ordered his team to begin transporting the wounded, prioritizing those with the most severe injuries. Once the team left, Ji-Huk took a deep breath and muttered to himself, "I can't believe 100 skeletons." Ji-Huk reflected on how easily the D-class awakened fighters had been overpowered by the skeletons. He noted that the awakened individuals on Earth were far weaker than he had expected. However, he quickly dismissed this as not the immediate concern. The most pressing issue was finding a way out of this situation without any further complications. The scene shifted to Ji-Huk at home, where he was holding bones from the skeletons he had defeated. He placed them inside a magical circle to analyze his system. To his surprise, he discovered that his system was still active within them, but the mana powering the skeletons wasn't his. He explained to himself that this was why he couldn't store the bones in his magical portal-only objects powered by his mana could be stored. Ji-Huk began to think about how to deal with items that he couldn't store. Meanwhile, Saya was making noise while playing with monster cores, which irritated Ji-Huk. He yelled at her, saying he couldn't concentrate with the noise. He then picked up one of the cores and examined it, wondering where she had gotten it. He warned her that monster cores weren't cheap and cautioned that breaking them could lead to serious consequences. Ji-Huk warned that breaking the monster core would cause serious problems. As he spoke, he sensed something strange. He noticed that the mana in the monster core resembled the mana in the skeletons. He carefully examined the core, remarking that it seemed raw and unrefined, much like natural mana or the mana found within gates. The similarity between the two was striking. He speculated that the force controlling the skeletons might have originated from inside the gate. Continuing his train of thought, Ji-Huk recalled that when he returned to Earth, his body had reverted to its natural state without any issues. However, he realized that the items stored within his magical portal might have somehow merged with the gate's influence. Instead of focusing on the items that remained stored, Ji-Huk began to reminisce about the treasures he had lost. A deep sorrow filled him as he wondered if the problem had originated from the transition process. Reflecting on the emergence of the skeletons, he concluded that the absence of his mana in them and its replacement with gate mana was the reason he had lost control. Despite still operating under his system, the skeletons had become uncontrollable. A chilling thought crossed his mind. If the skeletons could emerge into the outside world, other entities might escape as well. He couldn't even imagine how he would handle it if creatures like the Death Knight or Golem emerged from the gate. Frustrated and overwhelmed, Ji-Huk declared, "This has become a complete disaster." He admitted that the core issue was that he had created these entities, yet he lacked the ability to defeat them. To regain control, he realized that he needed to create skeletons capable of fighting on his behalf. Ji-Huk made the decision to begin rebuilding his skeleton army, but his biggest obstacle was the lack of crystal stones. He sighed, knowing that this was just the beginning of his struggle. Ji-Huk considered using monster cores to see what would happen, but he quickly realized he needed a large number of corpses to rebuild his skeleton army. On top of that, he would need significant funds. High-tier skeletons required magical circles engraved on gold, and he admitted that the money he had accumulated so far from his company was nowhere near enough. Feeling overwhelmed, Ji-Huk wondered when he could finally retire and live peacefully. He sighed, thinking the simplest way to earn money quickly would be to increase production, which would lead to higher profits. But he knew that a major production increase would drastically lower the quality of his products. He recalled Director Kim's advice to purchase a massive factory where he could produce everything at scale. But once again, he ran into the same issue. Buying a large factory would require substantial funds. Frustrated, he muttered to himself that he might have to return to the dungeons and hunt monsters again, which could boost his income. But the thought of it only added to his stress. Ji-Huk didn't want to return to hunting monsters. He had spent years fighting them and was exhausted by the thought of more battles. Still, he admitted that, given the difficult circumstances, he had no choice but to go back. Later, his phone rang. He picked it up, thinking it was a business call. He immediately told the caller that he didn't do interviews, didn't join associations, and only accepted manufacturing orders. But the caller clarified that he wanted none of that and introduced himself as Wu Jin, the rescue team leader Ji-Huk had saved earlier. Ji-Huk remembered him and asked about his health. Wu Jin replied that he was doing better and had been discharged from the hospital that very day. He explained that he wanted to personally thank Ji-Huk on behalf of all his team members. Wu Jin then asked if he could visit Ji-Huk, and Ji-Huk agreed, sending him the address. A short while later, Wu Jin arrived in a sleek sports car. Upon his arrival, Wu Jin went straight to Ji-Huk, thanking him once again for his help during the skeleton incident. He assured Ji-Huk that he hoped he hadn't disrupted his work. Ji-Huk replied that it wasn't an issue and that he had been taking a break anyway. Ji-Huk then complimented Wu Jin's car, noting how expensive it looked. Wu Jin smiled and confirmed that it was indeed costly, admitting that he had to stretch his budget significantly to afford it. He added that, as an awakened individual, he couldn't just buy any regular car. Wu Jin, eager to return the favor for saving his life, responded that he'd be happy to help with anything. Ji-Huk then shared that he had an excellent business idea and wanted Wu Jin's opinion on it. Wu Jin smiled, excited to hear more, and expressed his willingness to listen. The scene shifted to Ji-Huk, taking Wu Jin to a local shop that sold excess items from dungeons. Wu Jin asked why they were there, and Ji-Huk smiled, replying that everything had a purpose. He approached a merchant and asked if he had larger skeletons than the ones on display. The merchant, curious, asked what size Ji-Huk needed. Ji-Huk replied that he was looking for something from high-tier monsters, at least the size of a horse, preferably larger. The merchant then mentioned that the Diora skeleton fit Ji-Huk's specifications. Ji-Huk, unsure of what a Diora was, asked for clarification. Wu Jin explained that it was a B-tier monster and its bones were incredibly sturdy. Impressed, Ji-Huk told the merchant he would take the Diora and asked if there was anything else. The merchant mentioned having something smaller and weaker than the Diora, but more versatile. Ji-Huk agreed and purchased it as well. Ji-Huk then opened his magical portal and stored the skeletons inside. Wu Jin was surprised by what he saw and commented that he thought magical portals only stored summoned monsters. But now, it seemed they could store other things too. Ji-Huk grew nervous as he realized he had done this without thinking. He quickly explained to Wu Jin that after numerous experiments, he had managed to store other items, but he wasn't sure if he could store anything besides skeletons. Wu Jin, not entirely convinced, raised an eyebrow. He remembered that Ji-Huk had been collecting leftover skeleton bones previously instead of storing them in the portal. Ji-Huk then continued his conversation with the merchant, asking about the price of the items he had purchased. Wu Jin couldn't help but notice Ji-Huk's suspicious behavior, but he decided not to press the issue further. After completing the purchase, Ji-Huk returned to the factory with Wu Jin and told him that his role would be very important moving forward. Wu Jin replied that he didn't mind, but he needed to know exactly what was expected of him. Ji-Huk then opened his magical portal and pulled out a skeleton, announcing that he would start with an experiment. As soon as the skeleton emerged, Wu Jin confidently removed his shirt and prepared to face the creature. He declared that, as a B-tier monster, the Diora wouldn't stand a chance against his combat skills. He added that he trusted Ji-Huk not to make things too difficult for him. However, Wu Jin was startled by Ji-Huk's sinister smile. Ji-Huk, with a calm expression, informed him that the experiment was about to begin. Placing his hand on the skeleton's back, Ji-Huk asked Wu Jin to try riding it. Wu Jin stood frozen, unable to process what he had just heard. Noticing Wu Jin's hesitation, Gook commented that he was probably reluctant because there was no saddle. He then told him to wait a moment while he prepared one. After a short while, Ji-Huk finished setting everything up and told Wu Jin he could now ride the Diora. He reminded him that he had agreed to help, so it was important to keep his word. Reluctantly, Wu Jin climbed onto the Diora. Ji-Huk immediately asked him how it felt and whether it was easy to ride. However, the Diora moved erratically, making Wu Jin feel dizzy and lose his balance. He quickly dismounted and vomited. Unfazed, Ji-Huk made some quick adjustments to the Diora and asked Wu Jin to try again. This time, Wu Jin noticed a huge improvement. He told Ji-Huk the Diora felt much more stable and balanced than before. Ji-Huk was pleased and said it was time to test its running capabilities. After making a few more tweaks, Wu Jin praised the idea, saying the Diora could definitely be used every day. Excited, Ji-Huk confirmed that they would finalize the current modifications without making any more changes. After making further changes, Wu Jin dismounted the Diora and asked Ji-Huk if it was a combat-oriented summoned monster. He added that if someone were to ride it during a battle, it would provide significant support. Ji-Huk sighed deeply and explained that the Diora wasn't designed for combat. If he needed knights, he'd create something like a centaur. He clarified that he didn't want to complicate things by allowing anyone to ride his Diora. These creatures were specifically designed for riding, and he planned to produce and sell more of them. Wu Jin was surprised by Ji-Huk's plan and asked if he intended to sell the Diora purely as a riding creature. Ji-Huk asked him to wait a moment while he finished making the final touches. Once he was done, he asked if there was anything else missing that could be added. Wu Jin, and see his reactions, reassured Ji-Huk that everything was in order. Later, Ji-Huk pulled Wu Jin aside and mentioned that while the Diora didn't have any special combat features, it was perfect for riding in dungeons. He asked if that alone would make it popular. Wu Jin enthusiastically agreed and said he would save all his money to buy one. He suggested making versions in different colors instead of sticking to the plain designs. He also recommended adding black bone armor with shiny metallic layers around the legs to make it even more appealing. Additionally, he proposed adding interactive features for riders. Wu Jin suggested adding features that would make the creature respond to touch, increasing the user's immersion. Impressed by these ideas, Ji-Huk asked Wu Jin to share any additional suggestions he might have. Once the prototype Diora was completed, Ji-Huk gave it to Wu Jin, and the creature quickly became the talk of the town. Just as Ji-Huk had predicted, orders for the riding creature poured in. Wu Jin told Ji-Huk that the idea was amazing and the creature was capturing everyone's attention. Ji-Huk was thrilled with the success and asked Wu Jin if he could extend his leave a little longer, promising him a 30% discount when he purchased a Diora after its official release. Wu Jin laughed and replied that there was no need for convincing. He would use all his available leave to finish the mission. Ji-Huk and Wu Jin started working on the designs for the Diora, but they were interrupted by an employee who entered the office to inform Ji-Huk that all the assigned modifications had been completed. Upon seeing the Diora, the employee was amazed by its appearance and admitted that he never imagined he would see a skeleton creature suitable for riding in his life. Ji-Huk called the employee over and asked him to join them in designing the Diora, explaining they were just about to begin. The employee was surprised and asked if Ji-Huk was serious about letting him participate. Ji-Huk assured him that he could contribute anything he wanted. The employee approached the desk, picked up a pen, and suggested adding a silver tone to complement the bone color, along with some metallic decorations to enhance its appearance. After sketching the design, he asked Ji-Huk for his opinion. Ji-Huk expressed his admiration for the design, commenting that it was sleek and attractive. However, Wu Jin was unconvinced. He argued that the design was too complex and insisted the creature needed to look more powerful and imposing. The employee retorted that Wu Jin didn't understand art well and claimed that elegance and harmony always conveyed strength. He added that this was why Wu Jin was still a beginner in design. This sparked a heated debate between them, with each firmly standing by their opinion, which annoyed Ji-hook. To resolve the situation, Ji-hook intervened. He suggested they implement both designs and hold a vote to see which one received the most support. He added that if the employee won, he would receive a bonus, and if Wu Jin won, he would get a larger discount. Both agreed to the idea, and Ji-hook smiled to himself, thinking that this was exactly what he had anticipated. The competition had become intense, and Ji-hook happily imagined money flowing toward him. The scene then shifted to a large theater, filled with an eager audience. Ji-hook stepped onto the stage and introduced himself. He announced the leader horse, explaining that he would first present the basic version. Sia then asked someone to unveil the basic version, revealing the horse in its default appearance. However, the audience was disappointed by its unimpressive look. Ji-hook addressed the crowd again, explaining that this version was different from the one they had seen online. He then promised to showcase the version featured in the photos. With a snap of his fingers, he opened a magical portal, and from it, the horse emerged. As the crowd gasped in awe, Ji-hook declared that this was the version they had seen online. The audience grew excited, and cameras started flashing to capture the horse. Ji-hook continued, explaining that the design was customizable to the owner's personal preferences, meaning anyone who purchased the horse could modify its appearance as desired. He added that the horse wasn't just useful for daily life, but also for dungeon exploration. It featured a system that allowed it to automatically evade monster attacks and navigate to its summoner's location. The audience was astounded by these features. One person commented that this would make dungeon exploration much easier, while another praised both the idea and the design. They pointed out that awakened individuals often travel to dungeons in sports cars, but this horse would be something truly unique. Ji-hook turned back to the audience, saying there was no need for further explanation and that they could experience it themselves. He then announced that they would select a winner who would take the leader horse home that day, with the starting price set at 150 million. He placed his hand in a box to draw the winning number. The winning number was 37. The winner stepped up to the stage, and Ji-hook handed him a tablet that allowed him to customize the horse's design. He assured the winner that if anything wasn't available in the app, they could create it for him. The winner responded that he would stick to the available options, but remarked that the prices were a bit high. Ji-hook suggested he could pay with a credit card if he didn't have the cash on hand, but the man confidently replied that he had the money ready for such things. Ji-hook was taken aback by his response, thinking to himself that the man must be a high-ranking awakened individual. It was later revealed that the man was Han Sok, the leader of a team from the Hanel Guild. When Ji-hook learned that Han Sok was a leader in one of Korea's top 10 guilds, he thought to himself that he had just secured an excellent source of income. Han Sok asked Ji-hook if he could see the design he had chosen. Ji-hook explained that once a design was selected, it was registered to the user, so they couldn't display the final version. However, he added that they could show the individual parts the customer had requested. Ji-hook then instructed Sia to bring the requested parts and assured Han Sok that there would be no issue with him receiving his horse. Sang-ho was overjoyed to discover that Han Sok had chosen his design. Han Sok then asked if it was possible to engrave glowing letters of his name on the horse. Ji-hook replied that each glowing letter would cost 10 million, one making the total cost 700. The cost for engraving all the letters was 10 million each, so Han Sok reconsidered and decided to add them later. Instead, he requested that the letter S be engraved on both sides of the horse, along with a smaller S on its head. Ji-hook agreed and calculated the total cost of the horse with the modifications, which came to 7 billion. Next came the process of registering the horse under Han Sok's name. Ji-hook instructed him to place his hand on the horse's head. A magical circle appeared as Han Sok placed his hand, completing the contract between them. Ji-hook then asked Han Sok to choose a name for the horse. Han Sok chose the name Yundo, expressing his happiness with his new horse. Ji-hook, however, wasn't fond of the name, feeling it sounded too modest and old-fashioned. He thought to himself that everything had been going perfectly until this moment. Ji-hook announced to the audience that the first leader horse, named Yundo, had been sold to Han Sok, exciting the crowd. Ji-Huk then decided to proceed by announcing the owner of the second leader horse. He explained to the audience that ordinary people had only two ways to encounter monsters. The first was through news reports or by seeing monster corpses. The second was when monsters emerged from gates and attacked them. However, Ji-Huk clarified that things were now entirely different, thanks to his new idea, one that had never existed before. On a street where people spotted a monster, panic quickly set in. A young woman exclaimed that they needed to evacuate immediately. However, a young man calmed her down, explaining that someone was riding the monster and it wasn't dangerous. The woman, still shocked, asked if that meant there was no threat. The young man reassured her, explaining that the monster was a leader horse, a type of summoned creature. He continued, saying how amazing it was, and pointed out that the rider must be Han Sok, since his horse was the only one with an S engraved on its forehead. Hearing this, Han Sok decided to show off his horse in front of the crowd. He moved swiftly, performing impressive stunts that left the spectators in awe. The young woman expressed her desire to ride the horse with him. The scene then shifted to Han Sok riding his new horse as he met his guildmates. They asked if he was out with his new horse, and Han Sok dismounted to greet them. One of his guildmates commented that this horse was entirely different from the Diora they had encountered before. Han Sok proudly revealed that the horse's name was Yun-Do. A guildmate asked if he could touch the horse, mentioning that he had heard special effects occurred upon contact. Han Sok explained that those effects only happened when the horse's owner touched it. At that moment, Kim Hanu, the guild leader, arrived and expressed his admiration for the leader horses. When Kim Hanu noticed Yun-Do's body was covered with external armor, he was surprised. Han Sok commanded the horse to move aside and rest. However, Kim Hanu asked Han Sok for permission to examine the horse further, feeling uneasy about the unusual design. Han Sok asked what he intended to do. Kim Hanu reassured him, saying he just wanted to take a closer look and wouldn't do anything else. Still wary, Han Sok asked if he was truly serious and promised not to do anything reckless. Kim Hanu smiled and assured him not to worry. Kim Hanu began inspecting Yun-Do, commenting on how sturdy it looked and remarking that its capabilities were impressive. His eyes sparkled as he mentioned seeing in videos that Yun-Do could change its exterior appearance. He then asked Han Sok for permission to try removing the armor. Han Sok sternly rebuked him, warning him not to do anything foolish. Despite the warnings, Kim Hanu ignored him and attempted to remove the armor. Feeling the strength of the armor, he decided to apply more force. Han Sok rushed toward him, shouting that the armor wasn't a detachable piece and that the horse was crafted as a single entity. However, Han Sok arrived too late. Kim Hanu had already removed a part of Yun-Do's body. Han Sok was furious and shouted at the top of his lungs. Kim Hanu tried to justify himself, claiming he didn't know that removing part of Yun-Do would expose its internal structure. Han Sok completely lost his temper. Han Sok scolded Kim Hanu, reminding him that he had explicitly said Yun-Do was a single, cohesive piece. Kim Hanu retorted that he had only been informed too late, further aggravating Han Sok. Han Sok lamented that he hadn't even been given a chance to act or speak. Visibly uneasy, Kim Hanu apologized and asked if it would be better for him to buy a new horse. Han Sok angrily responded that it wouldn't make a difference now, because even with a new horse, it wouldn't be Yun-Do. Kim Hanu suggested repairing Yun-Do, but Han Sok dismissed him, demanding that Kim Hanu take responsibility and fix Yun-Do himself. Kim Hanu agreed, promising to take full responsibility and repair the horse. He assured Han Sok that when he approached Ji-Huk, he wouldn't tamper with anything related to Yun-Do without permission. We're with Ji-Huk, and he's celebrating big time. His magical horse project is a huge success. Each horse is bringing in millions in profit, and all his fears about going back to hard labor? Gone. But wait, over here, Ju is absolutely furious. His first magical horse is completely destroyed, and it only took a few days. This horse was supposed to be the cornerstone of his grand plan, and now it's in pieces. Kim Hanel, desperate for a solution, turns to Ji-Huk and asks if the magical horse can be repaired. Ji-Huk says it's possible, but it's going to be expensive. They'll need to find bones of the right size and replace them entirely. Kim Hanel is devastated. He's pointing out that replacing the bones will basically turn Yun-Do's body into a mix of different parts. And if Han Sok finds out? Kim nervously jokes that Han Sok might actually kill him. Ji-Huk offers another option, welding the broken bones back together. But there's a problem. The bones are too damaged, and welding them will only make them more fragile. Not exactly a great solution. Kim Hanel is feeling the pressure. He picks up his phone and tells Ji-Huk to wait while he consults with Hawk. Hawk is adamant Yun doll has to be restored to its original form, no compromises. Kim admits that even though he hasn't spent much time with Yun doll, he's already grown really attached to it. Ji-Huk doesn't argue and starts explaining the next steps. Ji-Huk drops the bombshell. The repair will cost about 50 million won. Kim Hanel doesn't even flinch. He says the most important thing is reinforcing the structure to make sure it's durable. He assures Ji-Huk that money isn't an issue, but the quality of the work has to be perfect. No cutting corners here. But then, Ji-Huk gets curious. He's looking at Yun-do, all broken and damaged, and he's like, how did this even happen? Even if it got hit by a speeding car, it wouldn't look this bad. Kim Hanel gets visibly nervous. He hesitates for a second, then admits Ith's the one responsible. Ji-Huk is stunned. He asks Kim to repeat himself, and Kim does. He explains that he saw a video where the bones moved independently and reassembled into armor. That gave him an idea. If he could control the bones freely, it would be a huge advantage for him. So, he decided to test it out. If it worked, he was planning to request something similar for himself. But now, he's admitting it was a mistake. Then, Kim Hanel throws another curveball. He asks Ji-Huk if it's possible to create similar armor for humans. Ji-Huk's mind starts racing. He's imagining the armor mounted on a person instead of a horse. He asks Kim why he'd want something like that, and Kim explains. He says if he could attach the armor to his arm, it would be perfect for him. He starts talking about his ability show he can enlarge himself up to 10 meters in height, but it causes issues with his equipment. Plus, he can't maintain that size for long periods. Ji-Huk thinks for a moment and suggests designing armor that can expand with Kim's size. Kim says he already has something similar, but it's not working well. It keeps interrupting him. Ji-Huk cuts him off and says, "Stop talking in circles. I need to see your current setup to design something that actually works for you." Kim Hanel hesitates. He's clearly unsure about showing Ji-Huk what he's working with, but he knows he doesn't have much of a choice. Kim Hanel hesitates for a moment, but then he agrees. He says they should go outside to demonstrate the issue. Once they're outside, Kim activates his ability, and boom, his body enlarges to a massive size. Ji-Huk has to tilt his head all the way back just to see his face. It's insane. Ju watches the transformation and immediately understands the problem. He tells Kim Hanel to return to his normal size and mentions that he doesn't need armor with super high defensive capabilities. Kim agrees, admitting that Ji-Huk has a point. Kim clarifies that all he really needs is clothing to cover his body. He says, "Look, my physique is impressive and all, but I don't want to draw too much attention to myself." Ji-Huk nods, saying he gets it. Then, Kim starts venting. He's complaining that everyone else gets to wear stylish armor during battles, while he's stuck fighting in a tight blue suit. Ji-Huk's just standing there, thinking to himself, "I don't even want to imagine what that looks like." Kim keeps going. He says his large size makes him super conspicuous. If an unstable gate appears, and he has to fight outside the dungeons, the next day's news is all about his blue suit. He's so embarrassed that he can't even walk down the street without people staring. Even his daughters started feeling embarrassed by him because of it. Kim admits he's always dreamed of having clothing that can adjust to his body size. He says armor functionality would be nice, but it's not essential. Then, he grabs Ji-Huk's hand and tells him, "I have the money to pay any amount. Just design something suitable for me." Ji-Huk's mind starts racing. He initially planned to make some quick cash by selling magical horses, but now he's seeing a golden opportunity. This is his chance to connect with an S-ranked individual. He remembers back in Saren. He tried to. Ji-Huk's mind is racing. He's thinking back to when he tried to fix the flaws in his system, which was full of issues. Back then, he linked skeletons to fighter bodies to measure their movements and learn from them. It was a mess, but it taught him a lot. Now, Ji-Huk turns to Kim Hanel and asks, "What kind of weapon do you usually use?" Kim Hanel is surprised by the question. He explains that he relies on martial arts because carrying a weapon big enough to match his size is just too cumbersome. Ji-Huk's eyes light up with excitement. He's like, "This is perfect." Then, pretending to be empathetic, he tells Kim Hanel, "Your situation is really challenging, so I'll personally design the armor for you. Kim Hanel is taken aback by Ji-Huk's sudden change in tone. Ji-Huk explains that since they're creating custom armor, its performance has to be top-notch. He tells Kim Hanel to prepare strong, durable materials, specifically high-tier monster bones that are large in size and recently deceased. He also warns that the armor will be extremely expensive. But Kim Hanel doesn't care about the cost. He's thrilled by Ji-Huk's response and assures him that money isn't an issue. He's willing to pay any price. He thanks Ji-Huk for his help, and you can see the excitement in his eyes. Fast forward 5 days later. Kim Hanel is visibly anxious, pacing back and forth. It's driving Hawk crazy. Hawk shouts at him, "Stay still. Your pacing is making me tense too." Kim Hanel replies, "It's hard to calm down. This is the first time in my life I'm going to have real armor." Han Sok, who's also waiting for Yoon-Dol's repairs, chimes in. He's like, "I'm waiting too, but I'm not nearly as nervous as you." Kim Hanel approaches Hawk and asks, "When will our requests be done?" Hawk responds, "I don't know exactly, but Ji-Huk said he'd finish in a few days and contact us afterward." Kim Hanel isn't satisfied. He repeats the question, "How long is a few days exactly?" Hawk, now annoyed, snaps back, "I have no idea. Just be patient." The tension is real, and everyone's on edge. But one thing's for sure: when Ji-Huk finally delivers, it's going to be epic. Kim Hanel is feeling the pressure. Hawk suggests he call Ji-Huk directly if he wants to rush him, but Kim hesitates. He admits that pressuring Ji-Huk might ruin the armor, and he doesn't want to risk it. Then, he turns to Hawk and asks, "Do you think the armor will turn out amazing?" Suk jumps in to reassure him. He says the armor will definitely be top quality, especially since he's seen Ji-Huk's craftsmanship firsthand with Yoon-Dol's armor. Hawk adds that if the armor turns out great, Kim Hanel needs to maintain a good relationship with Ji-Huk in the future. Kim Hanel looks confused, so Hawk explains. He says Ji-Huk is the only person in the world who can design custom armor specifically for someone like Kim. That makes him incredibly valuable, and Kim needs to stay close to him. Kim suggests they invite Ji-Huk to join their guild, but Hawk shakes his head. He says Ji-Huk wouldn't agree. Ji-Huk already has enough money, and he seems far more interested in business than fighting. Hawk points out that Ji-Huk doesn't even approach gates, which is unusual for someone with his abilities. Kim Hanel starts thinking out loud. He wonders why Ji-Huk, who doesn't seem interested in gates, chose to intervene during the unstable gate incident. Hawk speculates that it might have been because the gate was close to Ji-Huk's company, or maybe he was just intrigued because of his work with skeletons. Hawk goes on to say that the more he thinks about it, the more mysterious Ji-Huk seems. Despite his apparent greed for money, Ji-Huk hasn't used his abilities for direct profit. If he wanted to reveal his powers, he could have done it long ago. Even after his abilities were exposed, he showed no interest in exploring gates. Most awakened individuals seek to strengthen themselves through gates, but Ji-Huk doesn't seem to care. Han Sok chimes in, saying every awakened person has their reasons. Some avoid violence due to religious beliefs or other motives. But Kim isn't convinced. He counters that, if that were the case, Kim Hanel isn't buying it. He argues that if Ji-Huk really wanted to avoid gates, he wouldn't have intervened during the previous incident. He speculates that Ji-Huk might be dealing with some kind of trauma related to gates. But before the conversation can go any further, Kim Hanel's phone buzzes. It's a message, and it fills him with instant joy. His armor design is finally complete. He jumps up, practically vibrating with excitement, and rushes out of the office. He shouts over his shoulder, "Han Suk, take care of things while I'm gone." The scene shifts to Kim Hanel arriving at Ji-Huk's location in record time. Ji-Huk is surprised by how fast he got there, but Kim Hanel doesn't even pause to catch his breath. He's too excited. "Where's my armor? Can I see it?" he asks, barely containing his enthusiasm. Ji-Huk gestures toward a covered object and tells Kim Hanel to remove the cover himself. Kim approaches it, his hands trembling with excitement. He carefully pulls off the cover, and the moment he sees the armor, his eyes light up. It's stunning. Standing in front of it, Kim Hanel eagerly asks, "Is it wearable, even at my enlarged size?" Ji-Huk assures him that the armor is designed for everyday use and asks if he wants to try it on right now. Kim doesn't hesitate. "Absolutely," he says, already reaching for the armor. After putting it on, Kim Hanel asks, "Can I use my size-enhancing ability now?" Ji-Huk snaps his fingers, and a large number of bones appear out of nowhere. He explains that when Kim enlarges his body, the bones will automatically gather around him to form the armor. Ji-Huk points to a set of bones labeled 1 and instructs Kim Hanel to stand in front of them with his arms and legs extended. He tells him to wait until the bones turn red, and then he can activate his ability. The moment the bones glow red, Ji-Huk gives the signal. Kim Hanel activates his size-enhancing skill. At first, he feels a bit awkward, but then the bones start expanding and assembling around his body. The transformation is incredible to watch, and Ji-Huk seems impressed. When it's over, Kim Hanel stands there in his fully formed armor, looking absolutely epic. He's thrilled. The armor didn't break, and it fits perfectly. He's so happy, he can't stop grinning. Kim Hanel is so overcome with joy that he nearly cries. He can't believe his dream has finally come true. Ji-Huk gives credit to the high-quality materials Kim provided and assures him that the armor is extremely durable. Then he asks, "So, does it meet your expectations?" With tears in his eyes, Kim Hanel says it's even better than he imagined. "I can finally be a father who doesn't embarrass my daughter," he adds, his voice filled with emotion. But now Kim has a practical question. How do I return to my normal size? Ji-Huk explains that he just needs to wait until the light on the armor turns blue and then say the word return. Kim follows the instructions, and sure enough, his body shrinks back to its normal size without any issues. Still amazed by the armor, Kim Hanel can't stop gushing. He's thrilled that he won't have to buy new clothes every time he uses his skill. "You fulfilled my greatest wish," he tells Ji-Huk, prompting a rare smile from the usually stoic inventor. Ji-Huk humbly points out that the armor's performance isn't perfect, especially considering its cost. But Kim Hanel is too ecstatic to care. He reminds Ji-Huk of his earlier statement, "Anything wearable would have been enough for me. But this is beyond anything I could have hoped for." Then, Kim asks the big question, "How much does it cost?" Ji-Huk casually replies, 3 billion won. He explains that the materials were expensive and the craftsmanship was top tier. Kim Hanel is surprised by the amount, but doesn't hesitate. "Are you sure that's enough?" he asks, ready to pay even more if needed. Ji-Huk confirms the price, but adds a small request, an investment in Saron. He clarifies that it's not a traditional investment that just wants the ability to borrow funds when necessary. Kim Hanel is curious. "Why do you need to borrow money?" he asks. Ji-Huk dodges the question, instead emphasizing the benefits of the arrangement: lifetime after, sales service, upgrades, and more. He calls it a win-win situation and asks Kim what he thinks. Kim Hanel doesn't need much convincing. He's already sold on the armor and trusts Ji-Huk's expertise. "Deal," he says, sealing the agreement. Ji-Huk calls it a flawless deal, and Kim Hanel takes a moment to think. Then he asks, "How much money do you need?" Ji-Huk replies, "The more the better. I plan to repay it as quickly as possible. Saron's monthly sales reach hundreds of billions, so it won't take long." Kim Hanel doesn't hesitate. He offers to lend Ji-Huk 200 billion won from his personal savings. He explains that he's been saving this money for years, but could never find equipment suitable for himself. Now, with the armor, he's happy to put that money to good use. Ji-Huk is stunned. 200 billion? Are you sure? He asks, clearly surprised by Kim Hanel's generosity. Kim confidently reassures him, shakes his hand, and promises to transfer the funds later. "I'm looking forward to a fruitful collaboration," he says with a smile. Ji-Huk reciprocates the sentiment, grateful for the trust and support. Meanwhile, Han Sok is overjoyed to see Yun Duel fully repaired and back to its former glory. Kim Hanel excitedly recounts his experience at Ji-Huk's place, describing how he transformed into a giant and how the bones gathered around his body like something out of a movie. But then, suddenly, they hear a loud noise. Han Sok recognizes it immediately. "That sounds like a magical gate going unstable," he says. He adds that it's just a D-rank gate, so there's no need to intervene. The emergency team can handle it easily. Kim Hanel, however, has a different perspective. "The citizens are probably worried," he says. His eyes light up with excitement, and he declares, "I'll go and make sure they're safe. It's my duty to protect them." Hoke is surprised by Kim Hanel's sudden enthusiasm. "Since when did our usually reserved leader get so fired up about a D-rank gate?" he mutters, watching as Kim rushes off. At the unstable gate, giant snakes emerge, causing chaos. But Kim Hanel arrives swiftly, wearing his new armor. He battles the snakes with ease, defeating them as if they were mere toys in his hands. The crowd watches in awe as their guild leader takes charge. The next day, Kim Hanel's actions make headlines. The news anchor reports, the leader of the Hanel Guild, Kim Hanel, single-handedly dealt with the unstable gate, ensuring the safety of countless citizens. His new armor, a marvel of engineering, has become the talk of the town. The news anchor is buzzing with excitement. Kim Hanel, leader of the Hanel Guild, appeared in a completely new look to handle the unstable D-rank gate, he reports. He was wearing distinctive bone armor that has everyone talking. The anchor turns to his guest for an opinion. The guest speculates that the bone armor's design suggests it might have been created by none other than Ji Huck, the CEO of Kron, renowned for his ingenuity. Meanwhile, Ji Huck is watching the news from his lab, astonished at how quickly the story spread. He's delighted that Kim Hanel is satisfied with the armor, but he can't help but chuckle. "I really do love making money," he admits to himself. He glances over at SAA, who's playing with a skeleton. Ji Huck comments that this is actually beneficial. It helps him gather combat data. "SAA saves me a ton of time," he explains. "Otherwise, I'd have to spend hours training skeletons in combat systems." Ji Huck adds that once he collects enough data from a few battles, he'll be able to implement it across the rest of his skeleton army. But then, he notices SAA acting strangely with the skeleton. He yells at her, "Stop messing around. You're slowing down the data collection." Just then, Ji Huck's phone buzzes. It's a notification confirming the transfer of the 200 billion won from Kim Hanel. He stares at the amount, wondering how to use the money. "Should I expand my business?" he muses. The scene shifts to the CEO of Roku, who's frustrated. He's complaining about reduced guaranteed product quantities and how no other company matches Kron's profitability. But he acknowledges that Kron's current factory is operating at full capacity, leaving no room for additional orders. Then his assistant bursts in with big news. Kron is planning to open a massive new factory. The CEO is astonished and elated. "This changes everything," he exclaims. He praises Ji Huck's strategy of keeping the existing factory running while using the new one for separate contracts. The assistant mentions that Kron is currently seeking new contracts, and the CEO doesn't waste a second. "We need to negotiate immediately," he insists, already reaching for his phone. Back at Ji Huck's office, things are heating up. He's explaining to manager Kim that the talks about contracts for the new factory have caused a massive influx of orders. "Roku just offered us a deal for 700,000 guaranteed units per month," he says, still in shock at the sheer scale of it. Ji Huck can't hide his excitement. "Most of Roku's products are now being manufactured by us. It looks like everyone's finally recognizing Kron's importance," he declares, practically beaming with pride. He turns to manager Kim and instructs him to approve all incoming offers. But then he pauses, curious. "Why are we seeing such a big increase in orders from medium-sized factories?" he asks. Manager Kim explains the difference between large, clean factories and medium-sized ones. "Medium-sized companies usually focus on design and marketing to generate profits," he says. "But top-tier companies? They rely on their technological prowess. They've spent years developing their tech through collaborations and joint research. So it's hard for them to relocate production lines suddenly." Ji Huck seems to ponder this for a moment, but manager Kim reassures him. "Don't worry about technical strength. As Kron grows, technical companies will naturally seek partnerships with us. Once we establish strong technical exchange relationships, other companies will bring their orders to us without a second thought." Ji Huck raises an eyebrow. "Why are you so confident about this?" he asks, curious about manager Kim's optimism. Manager Kim is explaining how the Korean shoe industry collapsed, and it's pretty wild. He's saying that smaller companies, the ones that were super careful with every penny, were the first to go under. But the bigger players, the ones with strong tech and resources, they hung on a bit longer before they eventually left the market too. According to him, this is just how industries work. It's a cycle. Now, Ji Huck is thinking ahead. He's like, "Okay, if this is how it goes, maybe we need to start working on our own tech now to stay ahead of the game." He's even throwing out the idea of opening a research lab to boost their capabilities. He's not worried about the cost because, honestly, what do they have to lose? Improving their tech can only help, right? Then manager Kim brings up something interesting. He asks Ji-Huk if he knows about the Korean Footwear Association. Ji-Huk's like, no, what's that? So Manager Kim breaks it down. He says this association is a big dealer, at least it used to be. It's all about Korea's shoe industry, and even though it's not as famous as it once was, it's still the largest hub for the sector, with around 300 factories connected to it. These factories? They've survived some serious competition from cheap Chinese products, which means they're top-tier manufacturers with serious technical skills, especially in specialized areas like safety shoes. Manager Kim's got a plan, though. He's suggesting that if they team up with this association and learn from their techniques, they could fill in any gaps in their own tech pretty quickly. Oh, and here's the kicker: Manager Kim used to be part of this association. He was the guy who handled membership invites, so he knows his way around. He's also aware that Ji-Huk usually avoids this kind of stuff because, let's be real, it can be a hassle. But after hearing all this, Ji-Huk's starting to see things differently. He's realizing that Manager Kim knows what he's talking about, and maybe this is the move they need to make. So, what's next? Well, it looks like they're seriously considering teaming up with the association and stepping up their tech game. Stay tuned, because this could be a game changer. So, here's where things get interesting. Ji-Huk doesn't see any major issues with Manager Kim's idea. Since Manager Kim is already a member of the Korean Footwear Association, adding a new member like Ji-Huk shouldn't be a problem. Easy enough, right? Fast forward a bit, and Ji-Huk and Manager Kim show up at the Korean Footwear Association's welcome event. And let me tell you, this isn't some small gathering, it's huge. Ji-Huk is genuinely surprised by how big it is. He didn't expect a welcome event to be this grand. Manager Kim admits it's his first time at something like this too, so they're both kind of taking it all in. Then, out of nowhere, a man walks up and greets Ji-Huk with a lot of enthusiasm. It's Yoo Young-oh, the president of the Korean Footwear Association. He's clearly thrilled that Ji-Huk is there. Ji-Huk shakes his hand and says all the polite things you'd expect, like how honored he is to meet him. But inside, he's a little cautious. He knows better than to judge people by appearances, but something about this whole situation feels off. And then it gets weirder. The president invites Ji-Huk to the stage as the main figure of the event. Ji-Huk forces a smile, but he's starting to think this isn't just a casual welcome party. Something bigger is going on here. President Yoo kicks off the event with a speech. He talks about how Korea used to be the world's second-largest exporter of shoes. Back in the day, there were thousands of factories and hundreds of thousands of workers in the industry. But now, there are only about 300 companies left, and none of them employ more than 500 workers. The industry has been shrinking for years, with negative growth every year. A lot of people think the Korean shoe industry is basically done for. Ji-Huk chimes in, saying that even if you combined all the remaining factories in Korea, they still wouldn't be competitive. Manager Kim agrees and explains that this has been the reality for a long time. The industry has been struggling, and it's not getting any easier. So, what's the vibe here? It's clear that this event isn't just a celebration, it's a wake-up call. The industry is in trouble, and Ji-Huk is being pulled into the middle of it. What's he going to do? That's the big question. Stay tuned, because this is where things could really start to heat up. Manager Kim is laying it all out competing with China and Southeast Asia in the shoe industry. Nearly impossible. Just surviving this long is a miracle in itself. But then, President Yoo shifts the focus to Ji-Huk. He starts talking about how Ji-Huk's new skeletal technology could be the game-changer Korea's shoe industry needs. He's saying this tech could help them take back the market from China and restore the industry to its former glory. Big promises, right? But here's the thing, Ji-Huk suddenly realizes why he was really invited to this event. It wasn't just a friendly welcome. They want to use his technology. And not in a let's collaborate kind of way. They're looking to exploit him. Manager Kim isn't having it, though. He steps in and calls out the president, saying this wasn't part of the agreement and it's totally inappropriate to bring it up like this. He makes it clear that the skeletal tech is Ji-Huk's core asset, it's his unique ability. Asking for it is like asking for ownership of his work. The president tries to smooth things over, saying they're willing to pay a lot for it. But Manager Kim isn't backing down. He's visibly upset and questions why this wasn't brought up formally earlier instead of being sprung on them like this. Ji-Huk notices the tension rising and decides to step in. He tells the president there's clearly been a misunderstanding and suggests they end the meeting for now. He proposes they schedule another time to discuss things properly. Then, without another word, Ji-Huk leaves the venue. But inside, he's furious. He's thinking, if they want my tech, they better come at me with respect or beg for it. This isn't how you handle something this important. The next day, Manager Kim apologizes to Ji-Huk for how things went down at the event. But Ji-Huk reassures him, saying it's not his fault. He knows Manager Kim had his back, and that's what matters. Still, Ji-Huk's got a fire lit under him now. He's not going to let anyone take advantage of him or his work. If they want his tech, they're going to have to come correct. So, what's next? Ji-Huk's got a plan, and it's clear he's not backing down. This is just the beginning of a much bigger fight. Stay tuned, because things are about to get intense. Manager Kim is apologizing again, but Ji-Huk stops him, saying it's not his fault and there's no need to apologize. Manager Kim admits that if he'd known how the event would go, he never would have suggested they attend in the first place. Ji-Huk doesn't say much, he just leans his head against the desk and lets out a sigh. Manager Kim picks up on his bad mood and tries to cheer him up, saying they shouldn't dwell on what happened. He even points out that they don't really need the association anyway. But Ji-Huk isn't so quick to dismiss it. He tells Manager Kim that having diverse social connections can be useful, especially in the business world. Cutting ties completely isn't the answer. Then, he shifts gears and asks Manager Kim if he noticed anything suspicious at the event. Manager Kim hesitates, but eventually reveals that after talking to some friends, he found out the president and his associates have been spreading rumors. The rumors claim that Ji-Huk is planning to lend his skeletons to some companies and wants to keep it hush-hush. Ji-Huk immediately asks if Manager Kim thinks the president is behind this. Manager Kim says it's unlikely association is mostly symbolic now, and the president's role is more honorary than anything. So, if it's not the president, who's pulling the strings? Manager Kim explains that there are three big players in the association: Manhwa Distribution, Taehung Industries, and Tal International. These are the largest shoe manufacturers in Korea. But here's the catch, they don't actually produce anything in Korea anymore. All their factories are in China and Southeast Asia. Their headquarters are still in Korea though, and they're the main financial backers of the association. But their support is pretty superficial since they've moved all their production overseas. Ji-Huk listens carefully and then remarks, "So, these companies are the ones really running the show behind the scenes?" Manager Kim nods, confirming that's likely the case. Now, Ji-Huk's got a lot to think about. If these three companies are the ones spreading rumors and trying to manipulate things, he's going to have to figure out how to handle them. This isn't just about the association anymore, it's about protecting his technology and his future. What's his next move? That's the big question. Stay tuned, because this is getting serious. The three major companies would be left out in the cold. Ji-Huk nodded, clearly pleased with how Manager Kim understood his plan. He explained further that by making it look like he was lending skeletons to small companies, he could create a sense of unity and collaboration within the association. This would naturally isolate the three big players Manhwa Distribution, Taehung Industries, and Tal International since they've already moved their operations overseas and don't really care about the local industry anymore. Ji-Huk made it clear. His goal isn't just to take control of the association, it's to completely reshape the Korean shoe industry. By bringing small companies under his wing, he could create a strong, unified front that doesn't rely on the three major players. And once he's in control, he can systematically push those big companies out of the picture. Manager Kim was impressed by the strategy. He pointed out that this approach would benefit both Ji-Huk's company, Saren, and the small companies in the association. Meanwhile, the three major companies would lose their influence and be left with nothing. It's a win-win for everyone, except the ones who've been exploiting the system. Ji-Huk then dropped another key point. He reminded Manager Kim why he had stopped producing the skeletal transport units, even though they were highly profitable. It was because they were hurting too many other companies, and he couldn't absorb all of them into his business. But the footwear industry is different. There's room to bring in small companies without causing chaos. If he can successfully integrate them into his network, he'll have complete control over the association. And external interference like from the three major companies won't matter anymore. Manager Kim asked if Ji-Huk planned to actually lend skeletons to the small companies to gain control. Ji-Huk clarified that it wasn't about actually lending them. Instead, he wanted to create the appearance that he was doing so. This way, he could build trust and cooperation without giving away his core technology. Manager Kim was blown away by the idea, calling it a brilliant move that would benefit everyone involved except, of course, the three major companies. So, what's next? Ji-Huk's plan is set in motion. He's going to use strategy, not force, to take control of the association and reshape the industry. The three big players won't even see it coming until it's too late. This is chess, not checkers. And Ji-Huk is playing to win. After a while, Ji-Huk is back at the event, sends the president to hell, and starts speaking on stage, addressing small companies. The room fell silent as Ji-Huk's words hung in the air. He made it clear that he wasn't here to play games or cater to anyone's ego. If they wanted his skeletons, they'd have to follow his rules. Ji-Huk continued, laying out his terms. He explained that the skeletons would be lent to small companies first, prioritizing those that had been struggling the most. These companies would get access to the technology under strict agreements to ensure fair use and proper integration into their operations. He also emphasized that this wasn't a handout, it was a partnership. The small companies would need to prove their commitment to innovation and growth. Then, Ji-Huk dropped the bombshell. He announced that the three major companies, Mongong Distribution, Taihung Industries, and Tal International, would not be included in this arrangement. He didn't mince words, calling out their lack of loyalty to the Korean shoe industry and their decision to move production overseas. If you've already abandoned this industry, he said, then you don't deserve to benefit from its revival. The room erupted in murmurs. The president, visibly flustered, tried to intervene, but Ji-Huk shut him down again. This isn't up for debate, he said firmly. These are my conditions. Take them or leave them. Manager Kim, standing nearby, couldn't hide his satisfaction. This was exactly the plan they had discussed, and Ji-Huk was executing it flawlessly. By focusing on the small companies and cutting out the major players, Ji-Huk was not only strengthening the local industry, but also sending a clear message. Loyalty and collaboration matter. As Ji-Huk wrapped up his speech, he reminded everyone that this was a chance to rebuild the Korean shoe industry from the ground up. This isn't just about technology, he said. It's about trust, respect, and working together to create something lasting. The small companies in the room were visibly excited, while the representatives from the three major companies looked uneasy. Ji-Huk had turned the tables, and now they were the ones on the outside, looking in. As Ji-Huk stepped off the stage, Manager Kim approached him with a smile. "Well done," he said. "They didn't see that coming." Ji-Huk smirked. "They never do." The room is tense. Ji-Huk steps forward, his voice steady but commanding. He formally proposes the removal of the current president of the association. If the members agree to this proposal, he adds, I'm ready to join the association and lend my full support. The president's face turns pale. This has never happened in the history of the association. No president has ever been removed, he exclaims, his voice shaking. Ji-Huk doesn't back down. He calmly explains, the rules are clear. If half the members agree to a proposal, a vote can be initiated. And if 2/3 of the vote support it, the removal is immediate. Just because it hasn't happened before doesn't mean it can't happen nowhere in the future. The president tries to regain control. Only members can make such proposals, and you're not an official member yet, he argues, his voice rising.